Hello, everyone. Nice to see you on my channel, Touching Stories. Today you will hear an amazing story that is based on real events. It's a drama that will be a very important lesson for everyone.
In the village, it's very nice outside in the summer. The sun shines brightly and warms strongly. Lucy was only 6 years old. She ran around the yard without thinking about anything. She had a carefree childhood. I wonder why grandmother today does not leave the house for so long. The girl stopped and looked at the chickens, which were walking hungry. But this thought did not worry her for long. Lucy was distracted by something, and here she is already running down the path again. The girl could run out into the vegetable garden. It was even more interesting there. So she ran until lunchtime, and then she got hungry and came home. "Grandma, I want to eat," from the doorstep said Lucy. She got up from her chair and went into the kitchen. There was a curtain in the corner, behind which there was a bed, on which her mother was lying. She had been sick for a long time, and Grandma had been taking care of her all the time. And today she just sat next to her. She wouldn't leave her side. "Baba, what's wrong with Mommy? Why is she silent?" Lucy asked quietly. She was sitting at the table eating salad and potatoes. "I do not know, sweetie," discreetly brushed away a tear the woman. But even after that, the little girl did not suspect anything. She continued to sit on the chair, chattering her legs and working with a spoon. "I'm going out," Lucy said after dinner, and was ready to put on her sandals. "Wait," her grandmother held out her hand to her. "What is it?" Her granddaughter stared at her. "Come here," the woman asked her. Lucy came. She looked at her mother's pale face and could not understand anything. "Grandmother, why doesn't Mommy say anything?" Lucy was no longer in the mood for jokes. Her mother had been lying down lately, but she always called her daughter to her, talked to her, smiled. "She's going away," Grandma cried. "Where to?" naively asked Lucy. She was so small that she could not understand it yet. "Don't ask anything. Sit next to Mommy. Maybe she will say something." The woman couldn't hold back. Mommy, rubbed her daughter's hand. "Lucy," the girl said something. "Get up." The girl pulled her hand. "I'm sorry, dear, I can't." The last words were completely incomprehensible. "Mom," as if she realized something and whimpered. She held her hand as she walked away. Her grandmother was in pain and turned away. "Oh, Selena, what have you done?" the woman wailed. She realized that all this might not have happened. "Doesn't Mommy love us?" Her granddaughter turned to her. She loves us very much. It's just that she feels very bad." The grandmother sat down next to Lucy and saw that her daughter was no longer alive. "Where are we going?" The girl didn't want to leave her mom's bed. "Everything, honey. She is no longer with us. She will now stand at your back and always protect," sobbed the woman. Lucy turned and looked at her mom. It seemed to her that he lost weight. His face stretched out. The girl cried. She felt ashamed for some reason. She turned away and ran away. She did not yet realize that she had only her grandmother and no one else. A few days later, a lot of people gathered in the house. Everyone was talking about something. Some were crying. Lucy watched and still did not fully understand what was happening. From that moment, the girl and her grandmother were left to live alone. It was hard, but there was no one to hope for. Everything was borne by the woman on her shoulders. "Lucy, wake up. It's time to go to school," said the grandmother in the morning. "Oh, I don't feel like it," the girl stretched. "You don't want to, but you should. If you study, you will have everything later, and work and money," her grandmother assured her. "I know." Lucy lazily got out of bed, got up, went to wash up, then breakfast. On the table, she always waited flavored pancakes or pancakes. And then she had to go to school. The girl did not complain. She was reluctant to just wake up in the morning, and it was easy to learn and communicate with the guys. Maria, despite the fact that Lucy lost her mother early, she perceives information so well. For her years, the girl is very well developed, said the teacher at the meeting. "Oh, it's very happy at home. When she learns poems, you can only marvel. She reads and already knows everything." The woman smiled in response. The older the class became, the harder it was for the grandmother. In the morning, she not only had to get her granddaughter ready for school, but also had to manage in the yard. Lucy helped in many ways, which could not help but be pleased. In 7th grade, the girls began to cluster together. They whispered about boys, began to go in pairs to the club, to the disco. Lucy, hi Anthony, who lived at the other end of the village, came up to her one day. What do you want? The girl turned to him. Shall we go out? Even though everyone was here, dancing, he wanted to take her away. I did not want to. Lucy was then in the 8th grade, and about boys had not yet thought about boys. All right, he got away from her. With her friends, they danced until the end of the disco, and then the girl went home. Lucy, again she heard a familiar voice. Anthony, scared, she saw him in the bushes. Why don't you want to go out with me? He asked her that question again. It happens, she was walking by. Nothing, I'll get you anyway. The boy clenched his fists. Lucy was flattered that many boys liked her and that Anthony was the first to start chasing her. She came home, went into her room, didn't turn on the light, looked out the window. The boy stood behind the bushes, smiled. What are you looking out there? Her grandmother looked in on her. Quiet. The girl put her finger to her lips. Silence, silence. Grandmother went back out. When Lucy came to her, she had already changed her clothes and sat down at the table. Anthony, she didn't look at the woman. Anthony what? She didn't understand. Walked home, only not in the open, but so, through the bushes, laughed the granddaughter. How? Grandma sat down after she put a plate of dinner in front of her granddaughter. Lucy looked at her grandmother with such a look that she realized that the girl did not want to talk about it anymore. How are things at school? Maria changed the subject. All is well. There are no 3s. 4's almost 2, chewed, said Lucy. You are my smart girl, approached her grandmother. At that moment she remembered her mother. Nothing, grandmother. Everything will be fine, said her granddaughter. Summer came. Lucy, as the best student, was sent to the southern camp. She was glad to be able to leave her village, to show herself, to see others. She and her grandmother packed her things, and she had to borrow some from her friends because she didn't have any. All right, behave yourself there, Maria admonished her as she put her on the bus. Bye. Lucy said nothing more. They were gone for a long 3 weeks. At first, when the girl got there, it felt strange and lonely. She didn't know anyone. She wanted to go home, back to her grandmother. But not even 2 days passed, as the girl got acquainted with almost everyone in her squad. Now it was the most wonderful vacation of her life. Call right. They hugged their girlfriends goodbye. I will, they promised each other. When the girl was back in her village, all she did was talk about what she saw, how she spent her time, where they were taken, and more. If your mother were alive, she would have taken you to the sea herself. The grandmother was sad again. Don't be sad. Her granddaughter hugged her for the umpteenth time. She was afraid for her grandmother because she had a bad heart. In 9th grade, Lucy finally gave Anthony a chance. He approached her at the dance, and she did not push him away. They danced and then went for a walk. Why were you so adamant about it then and now you're okay with it? The guy's been after her for 6 months. I don't know, she shrugged and smiled. From that moment on, to school, from school, to dances and all other places Anthony and Lucy went together, they were even teased as inseparable. Are you afraid that I'll run away? The girl asked him often. Sometimes she was tired of being around him all the time. No, I just like being around him, he admitted. That's how the school years passed. The graduation was ahead. Grandma never spared money for her granddaughter. She saved from her pension to buy her a new dress or shoes. The girl didn't abuse it. But now, when she needed an outfit for the prom, Lucy did not resist, and they went to buy her a dress. How beautiful it is, the graduate twirled in front of the mirror. Yes, sighed her grandmother. She realized that her baby had grown up and would soon fly out the nest. My darling, just don't cry. Lucy sat up to her. What is there to cry? I understand. She only waved her away. The party was great. The children were happy, the teachers too. And now we're going to greet the dawn, someone said loudly. It's a custom practically everyone who has just graduated from school has. We'll go with them. The girl was ahead of Anthony because she knew he would want to be alone. Okay, the boy agreed. So they all went to the place where they could see it best, the river. There the guys had a picnic. The girls set up, the guys helped them. I can't be like this with everyone, sat a young man under a tree. You're such a boo then. If we live separately, it will always be like this. The girl was nagging him. This night flew by quickly. It was very fun and good. Lucy came home when it was already light. Her grandmother was already on her feet. The granddaughter said hello and entered the house, and there she fell just without feelings on the bed. She slept until the evening, and then she had to get up and do something to help. "When are you going to apply now?" Maria asked. "I don't know. Probably in 3 to 4 days, like Anthony. The young people plan to do everything together." "That's good. Do you believe in yourself?" Her grandmother clarified her. "Of course, always answered the same way to this question the girl." "That's right. Remember that your mother is always with you, and so am I." The woman kissed her. Anthony was waiting for her at the bus stop. She came running. "Because of you, almost missed the bus," he said resentfully. "Well, we didn't," she replied optimistically and laughed. "Okay, let's go." At that moment, their transportation came. The young people got on and drove towards their dreams. Although Lucy and Anthony entered the same city, but in different institutes. The girl arrived, submitted documents. The exams were in a while. Anthony and Lucy decided that they would wait for them here. They offered dormitory accommodation for non-residents. "Well, are you ready?" the girl asked him. "Always ready," he answered her. They had a difference of a day. Lucy passed everything from the first time and was sure that she would be enrolled. Anthony, on the other hand, came back sad. What? She was waiting for him outside the institute. He didn't pass. He stood with his head down. "Don't get upset, it's not too late. Let's try somewhere else." She tugged his sleeve. "No, I'll wait." He pulled his arm out. "What?" She glared at him. Next year, he turned around and walked down the street. "What about me?" She stood there asking him that. "Why, we can live together. I'll work, you study," he said as he walked. Lucy could hear only fragments of phrases. "Where shall we live?" "In a dormitory." She couldn't understand him. She caught up with him. "Why?" "To rent an apartment." Anthony turned around. "What for?" "I'm not going to ask my grandmother." It was categorical. "Okay, what do you want me to do? You want me to leave?" He grinned. "Yeah, you'll come over on the weekends when I can." "I will." She offered a good option. "Oh." He took offense at her and walked with a quick step. Lucy stopped. She knew it was best not to approach him in this state. The girl returned to her dormitory. She didn't plan to go to the village until tomorrow. Today, however, she thought Anthony would still come back, but he was prideful. The next day, Lucy went to the station, assumed that the young man had spent the night there, but even here he was not there. Fuck it all, why should I look for him? The bus came. She climbed into it and went home. The grandmother was very happy about her granddaughter's success. She realized that now she would have to be left all alone, but it was to be expected. Only one thing Maria was afraid of, that with her granddaughter did not turn out the same way as with her daughter. Lucy met with Pedia only after a week. All this time he was unknown where he was. Probably at home, but she didn't want to go to him herself, so they met at the club. "When did you arrive?" he asked as if nothing had happened. The day after exams, she didn't want to hide anything from him. Understandably, he was frowning as usual. For the rest of the summer, boyfriend and girlfriend dated, but not like they used to. Lucy thought he resented the fact that she got in and he didn't. "That's it, Grandma. Bye. I'll call you. Don't lie to me. If it gets bad, tell me. I'll be there." She kissed her on the cheek. "Okay. God bless you." Maria crossed her. Lucy checked into the dormitory without any problems and started her studies. She, as in school, tried to listen to everything that was said. Her results were high, but close to winter, everything changed. "Lucy, Lucy," a neighbor shouted into the phone. The girl saw that the woman was calling from her grandmother's phone. "Hurry up and come. Stepanovna is bad. I'm afraid she'll die." The neighbor was still talking loudly. "All right, I'll be there in the morning," she hung up. Now it was late. The buses were not running. Until morning, Lucy could not find a place. The minutes stretched like hours. The girl could not wait until dawn. When the first ray broke through the clouds, she immediately grabbed her bag and ran to the station. She shoved her money and passport through the window. The bus was in 40 minutes, which was good. The road was uneven. They rocked back and forth. Maybe that made the girl fall asleep. She did not notice how she arrived. It was good in her situation. From the stop, Lucy ran jogging to her house. All of her grandmother's friends and the local medic were already gathered there. "What's wrong, Grandma?" Her granddaughter ran up to her. "Lucy, she needs to go to the hospital, to the city," wailed friends. "Can we do that?" She turned to the medic. "If someone would drive her," she shrugged. "Well, will she be able to make the trip?" the girl asked persistently. Yes, she nodded her head confidently. Okay, now, Lucy jumped up and ran out of the house. She ran to one of her classmates. His father had a good car, quickly told everything. "If you put gas in it, why not help the man?" agreed Uncle Harry. Of course, she rushed back to her house. On the way, she met Pedia. "Wait," he grabbed her hand. "Anthony, darling, Grandma's not well. I have to run." She looked at him. "Your grandmother will wait," he said rudely. And in that moment, Lucy realized he wasn't quite himself. She jerked her hand away. If the man didn't care about her family member's life, then what were they going to talk about? "Back off," she ran on. Lucy always knew where her grandmother had money lying around, but she never went in there herself. There was a decent amount there, but when the car was paid for, and then for the ward, there were literally crumbs left of that amount. All night the girl spent in the corridor. She waited for what the doctors would tell her. "Who are you, Maria?" A man came out of the room. "Granddaughter," shook Lucy. "So let's go to my room." He took her hand and led her to his office. "I take it it's bad?" The girl was fainting. "Look, we need emergency surgery, but it's not cheap. But first Maria should be taken to a more professional clinic," said the doctor. "I will do everything," said Lucy. But when the doctor voiced her the amount, she turned white, realizing that so much she will not even get a loan. No. For people who have at least some income, an apartment or a car, this figure would be manageable, but not for Lucy, who had nothing at all. She left the office, sat down on the couch. Okay, to move the grandmother, it's not a problem, but what to do next, she did not understand at all. Lucy had done everything. Now time was working against her. In the dormitory, she didn't want to socialize with anyone. For some reason, she wanted to go to the store and buy herself something to drink. Of course, the girl knew that it was not a solution, but that's what she wanted to do now. "So I was standing here," she heard a cheeky female voice. "All right, come on in." She let the ordinary girl pass. She paid for everything, left the store, and in a minute Lucy was on the street. "Hey, friend, I'm sorry I was so mean to you," said the same girl. "It's okay," Lucy went on. "Wait a minute," caught up with her. "What else?" The girl stopped. She wanted to be alone. "I saw that you took the shampoo. Let's go somewhere to sit together." She looked at the package that was in Lucy's hands. Of course, she didn't want to go anywhere, let alone talk to anyone. She didn't know why she did it. Ariana, her new acquaintance, turned to her. "Lucy," she answered. No pleasantries, just introductions. They came to a house, went up to the second floor. It was unclear whose apartment it was, Ariana's or hers, but it was very small and not very clean. "Make yourself comfortable," the landlady said. Okay, went to Lucy's room, because that's where Ariana had pointed. I'm not having that." She pointed at the champagne that the guest was trying to open. "Well, it's just I don't drink anything else," she said, still struggling with the cork. "So drink it, and I will." She took a stronger drink out of the bag. When the cork was finally removed, Lucy splashed some into her glass and drank it immediately. Oh, not so fast." Ariana tried to stop her. "I can't. I should have," exhaled the girl. "I see you've got something going on now," and the hostess took a sip. "Yes, but that's just my problem," Lucy admitted. "Listen, sometimes it's good to talk to a stranger, to tell him everything that you have in your heart. Believe me, it will immediately become easier," the girl said knowledgeably. "Even if I tell you that, I will not feel better." She felt the gas bubbles hit her head. "And you try it," practically forced her. "All right," she poured her glass again. "I'm listening." Ariana leaned back in her chair after another sip. "My grandmother is very seriously ill. Now she needs an operation and a lot of money for it, and I can do nothing." Lucy waved her hands. "Relatives?" hinted the guest. "No, they just don't exist," cried the girl. "Okay." Looked out the window of the landlady. "I can offer you something, but you are unlikely to like it." "Speak." Lucy went forward. She didn't care about everything now. She was ready for any adventure for the sake of her grandmother. "There is a house on the outskirts of the city where men get pleasure." Ariana did not finish. No, Lucy waved her hands. "And she said to any adventure," laughed the landlady. But not like that, the guest grumbled and poured herself another glass. And how do you want to quickly earn such a lot of money? Wondered the interlocutor. Well, I'll listen, drank another glass in a gulp. So I think you have already understood what is going on there. I can arrange it for you. Ariana raised her glass. Are you there too? Lucy wondered. How do I know all this then? She took a sip. Oh God, the guest clutched her head. That evening they talked a great deal more about things that Lucy would have dismissed at the outset. But now she realized that it was really the only way to get what she wanted. Wake up, friend. Ariana pushed the girl in the morning. Oh, what a headache. She wrinkled her nose. Now our new acquaintance brought her a pill. Thank you. She took it with water. So what have you decided? The landlady asked. I'll probably agree, but I don't know how I'll behave. I'm so ashamed and disgusted, Lucy said. Everyone starts with it, and then they get into it, said Ariana and laughed. The girls cleaned themselves up and went to the place the girl had told them about yesterday. Are you going to wear that? She looked at Lucy. Why, she was smoothing her skirt. No, friend, this will not do. The girl opened her closet and began to go through things. When she put on Lucy a short blouse and the same skirt, stepped back and showed the class. And what, to walk around town like that? Lucy couldn't believe it and was embarrassed. It'll be right there, dialed Ariana. A car came to pick them up, and now they were really going to that very house. There Ariana left her friend downstairs and went up to the floor herself. A few minutes later, they were already coming down with a pretty but already aged woman. Come with me, she beckoned her with her finger. Okay, Lucy glanced at Ariana. They went up to the office, which was very bright. The girl looked around. She had never seen anything like this, not even in the movies. My name is Martha. Sat down at the desk. The woman sat down. Lucy, she worried. Baby, are you sure? She leaned over the table. You know, not really, but I'm in so much trouble I can't put it into words, Lucy cried. Leave your snot somewhere else. You need some character here. Martha got up from her seat and started to walk around the office. Excuse me. She took a napkin and wiped her tears. Are you going to work or not? The woman stood over her. I will, the girl said without raising her eyes. Then come downstairs. I'll get Leela. She'll show you everything. Martha pointed to the door. Can I ask you a question? Lucy turned as she stood up. Yes, listen to her, the hostess of the establishment. I'm studying. Can I study during the day? That was a question that interested her. Of course, but I suggest you transfer to a correspondence course. She gave her good advice. Thank you. Lucy left the office and went downstairs. She was really disgusted to be here. Even though everything was clean, it seemed like it wasn't. Let's go, a pretty girl called out to her. Apparently it was Layla. They walked through the corridors. The girl went on and called some names, showed the rooms, but Lucy didn't remember anything. Finally, they came to one of the rooms, which was almost at the end of the corridor. Is this it? Lucy pointed her finger at the door. Yes, this is your room. Leela nodded her head and they went inside. They went inside together. Only then did the girl relax who was accompanying Lucy. There are cameras everywhere. I couldn't say anything unnecessary, she explained to the girl. Now it is clear why you all walked the line here, even smiled Lucy. Remember the most important thing. When someone comes in here, don't take him as a person. It's just a dream, she advised her. Thank you, hugged Layla. She was pleased that everyone here was willing to help her. No one comes here from a good life, she said, and left the room. Lucy didn't know what to do. She waited for someone to come and say something. And she did. The doctor came and called her in for a checkup. Well, I can tell you that you're doing just fine, the woman said. Thank you. Lucy didn't know what else to say. She got up from the chair and went to her room. She just sat in front of the mirror and looked at her reflection. Martha came into the room. So are you ready for tonight? She looked at her. Probably. Didn't raise the girl's eyes to her. What do you mean, I guess? Martha raised an eyebrow. May I confess something to you? The girl seemed very ashamed, though she was. Speak up. The woman gave no indication. I've only had it once, so did not raise her eyes. Lucy. Jesus, inexperienced themselves. And there you go, the woman shook her head, but there was nothing in her eyes that looked like pity or anything else. Martha got up and left the room. Lucy didn't understand whether she was understood or not. In the evening, a man came into her room. The girl did not look at him, so that there was no immediate emotion inside. The one sat down on the bed. He liked the look of the one who sat here. "Shall we talk?" He dumbfounded her with a question. Well, she didn't move. "You see, I came here for a reason. My wife left me, and I don't even have anyone to talk to." He talked a lot more, cried at the end, and then left the money on the nightstand and left. Lucy could not believe her happiness. She wanted to talk to someone. Layla came in to see how it went. She was happy for the new girl that it was like that today. In the morning, Lucy got ready and left for her studies. Her mind was filled with thoughts of nothing but what had happened tonight. She was the lucky one, as her new colleague had said, but what would happen next? When the lectures were over, she went into the dormitory, grabbed some things, and went back to where Ariana and Layla were. "Come in," Martha greeted her. "Hello," Lucy was polite. "So since things are working out for you, you'll just be escorting customers," the woman told her. And if wanted details. Then, that's it, she realized what the girl wanted to ask her. Okay, Lucy smiled to herself. She thought to herself, she would do her best if possible. The first time some rich guy had taken her, he needed to show up in public with a pretty picture. He had been talking to someone all evening, bragging about how he had recently met a young beauty. On the way back, he tried to do something, but he was so drunk he couldn't. "Well, friend, you're a lucky girl," Ariana told her when she heard about it. Then there were a few more of the same elderly customers who wanted a doll around. They were willing to give money, buy outfits, just to make their friends jealous. In bed, however, they couldn't do much. Most of the time it didn't work out. Lucy was disgusted when they drooled all over her face and fell off next to her. "I think I'm going to put you in the VIP category, because they're the only ones who order you." Martha looked at a magazine. The money in Lucy's piggy bank was coming in fast. She went to the hospital to see how her grandmother was doing. The doctor who was seeing her came out to the girl. "I don't know if I'm going to make you happy or sad now, but your grandmother doesn't need any more surgery." He stopped talking. "How?" Lucy had only one thought. "No, you misunderstood." He took her hand and smiled. "Why scare you like that?" She crouched down in the hallway. "For as long as we've been watching Maria, she's been doing well. Apparently she had some kind of severe stroke. But now everything is fine. A scheduled operation was performed, but one more such blow she will not withstand," said and warned the doctor. "Thank you." Lucy didn't know whether to cheer or cry. It had been 4 months since she had started all this. As she drove from the hospital to the dormitory, she saw Anthony there at the entrance. "What are you doing here?" She just wanted to ask and pass by. "Waiting for you." He was kind of angry. "I don't have time," she remembered. "The last time they met." "Let's talk." He took her hand like he did then. "Anthony, Grandma's not well. She needs to go home soon. I don't want to talk anymore." Lucy looked him in the eye. "What happened to our relationship?" He blinked. He looked like he was going to cry. "That's something I'll have to ask you," she cut in. Actually, more than not communicating, Lucy was afraid that the young man would find out what she was doing and where she was getting her money. Today, Lucy walked with only one thought in mind. What would she say to Martha now? There was joy in her heart that she wouldn't have to do all this anymore. "Where are you going?" "Go back to your room," the landlady shouted at her. "Martha, I need to talk to you," Lucy told her. "All right." She opened the door of her study to her. They went in, sat down in the chairs. "I don't want to work anymore," Lucy said quietly. She didn't look at her landlady as she had other times. "What?" "I have plans for you." She turned the magazine to her. "What plans?" The girl did not understand, usually recorded for a day too. But now she saw that the whole week was filled. "Listen to me, and don't you dare refuse," looked intently at her Martha. "All right," nodded Lucy. "I don't know how he found out about you, but he called yesterday and said he needed you for a week." She ran her pen over the entries in the journal. 7 days, that's a long time. Lucy was frightened. "It's okay, you'll be patient. Look how much he's paying. It's only through us. Imagine how much you'll get." She showed the amounts. "Okay, but this will be the last time." The girl stood up and left the office. She went to her room. She thought to herself, It's good that she was lucky with her looks. Everyone wants a doll, and here she is. At least this one would turn out to be old and infirm. With these thoughts, Lucy was getting ready, and lo and behold, she was summoned. She came out of the building. She was escorted to the car. She got into the salon and saw a rather handsome, but already in years a man. "Hello." The girl looked at him. If other girls taught to start making eyes at once, Lucy never did it. "Good evening." He kissed her hand. "How are you? Everything's fine?" She tried to be polite. "I'm Victor." He held her hand this way and that and looked into her eyes. Lucy, she was embarrassed and blushed when people looked at her like that. "Wonderful name." He moved closer to her. They drove for quite some time, stopping at a large gate, waiting for it to be opened. Victor was silent almost the whole way. He put his hand on the girl's leg and just stroked. After that, they were escorted to a large house. That's where the reception was. The man was introducing his date to everyone who was there. The men were licking their eyes, the women were jealous, and Victor was cheering. They stayed there for about 2 hours. Afterward, they packed up to go home. Lucy thought she was about to be brought back, but it turned out they were going to Victor's house. "I have to go to school in the morning," she said modestly. "No," Victor said sharply. "I have an arrangement with Marta." She looked at him. "I have an arrangement with her too." He rubbed his finger on her finger, showing that he was paying the money. The girl was silent. She thought that if now, in her house, he started to molest her, there was nothing she could do. Lucy bit her lip and waited for what would happen next. When they entered the house, Victor offered the girl wine, though she didn't like him but agreed. She wanted to dull her feelings. The man sat closer to her. As in the car, he put his hand on her leg. "Tell me, why did you start doing this?" He started talking to her. She didn't know if it was okay to be frank with him. "Go on, trust me, the information won't get any further than this house." He leaned over and kissed her shoulder. "My grandmother is very ill," the girl cried. "I was surprised when you said about studying. Usually those who came to this profession and did not get in, and in order to stay, start doing different things." It was clear that the man was in the mood to talk. "If it hadn't been for Grandma, I would never have done such a thing. And now," she sobbed and fell silent again. "What?" Victor turned to her. "Grandmother went on the mend. I don't need money anymore. And here you are." She couldn't finish. "Okay, don't make it up. Everyone needs money," he laughed. The man was already pretty drunk. "Yeah," she drank her glass in one gulp. "Okay," he piled on top of her. Everything inside Lucy shuddered. "Don't," she started to push him away. "I don't get it." He tore at the blouse on her chest, buttons flying off to the sides. "Please," Lucy was already sobbing. Victor kissed her on the lips, on the neck, on the shoulders, and then collapsed. The girl waited a few more minutes, realized that he fell asleep, pushed him away from her. She found a shower, took it, climbed with her feet on the chair, curled up in a lump, and fell asleep there. "Get up." She heard a sharp shout, opened her eyes. She was scared again. "Can I go away? I'll tell Martha. She'll give you everything back." Lucy was ready to cry again. "That's it. I don't want to hear it." He went into the kitchen. "Maybe I should cook something for you." She wanted to gain this man's trust. "Okay, you cook here and do what you're supposed to do for breakfast. I'm going to take a shower. I'll be right back." He left. Lucy stood in the middle of the kitchen. She started to get the groceries out and cook. The girl made coffee, fried cheesecakes, put everything on the table. At this moment, the man returned. He sat down at the table. He began to eat breakfast. "What are you standing there? Join us." He shook his head at the seat across from him. "Thank you." She sat down. "Speak," he said in a tone as if he was ordering her. "You see, I don't want to do this anymore. Can I leave?" she begged. "Look, I have a proposition for you." His tone softened a little. "I'm listening." She drank her coffee in small sips. "I don't know if you realized yesterday or not, but for months now I've been having trouble with women." Lucy could see how embarrassed he was. "What's that got to do with me?" She was glad of that fact to herself. "I'm offering you this whole week, which I pay for, to stay with me. Yes, when I drink, I can get lusty, but trust me, it won't do you any harm." He didn't look at her. "I have to attend lectures." She started her song again. "It won't be a big deal if you miss a week." His commanding tone came out again. "Okay, still, I need clothes." She realized she was now sitting in a blouse with no buttons. "Don't worry about that. Everything will be there, Victor promised. 6 days and I'm out of your hair. Lucy was now looking at the man for what he said to really be true. Yes, I have an important meeting at the end of the week. You need to be on top of things. He said those words and walked out of the table. Am I staying here? The girl was confused. I'll be there soon. He changed his clothes and left the house. Lucy decided to call Ariane and tell her everything. Come on, friend. This is the dream of all of us. You're in a big house. No one touches you. And they promised to buy you some clothes, she said with admiration. Yes, she realized that girls think a little differently than she did. Now the girl understood that all girls who come to the big city in a dream to meet a rich husband. And that, so she married him. Goes to receptions and meetings together, just as a pretty picture and bragging to her friends. And then you sit in such a big house like everything is there. But in reality, there is nothing. The girl even cried. Victor arrived in the evening. He brought some packages, gave them to Lucy, and went to another room. Should I make dinner? She asked him after him. Get changed, we'll go to the restaurant, he said without turning around. The girl began to look at what was in the bags. They went to a very nice place. Even by the people, it was obvious that no one would come here so easily. They sat down at a table. The man made an order. Why don't you eat or drink anything? Victor noticed how everyone was looking at them. Lucy, in her new dress, was just gorgeous. She saw him drinking one glass after another and thought that in the evening he would start pestering her again. And so it turned out, back when they were still riding in the car, he lifted the hem of her dress to put his hand. Don't, just like yesterday, she started to remove his hands. What? His eyes were angry. They walked into the house. He grabbed Lucy's arm and pushed her down onto the couch with force. Again, it was just like yesterday, and then he fell asleep. The girl sat for a couple minutes to make sure the man was definitely asleep, and then got out from under him. So the time passed. For 2 days, Victor was not at home at all. Lucy already thought that he wouldn't come. She wanted to leave, but didn't dare. She decided to wait until the last day, and if he didn't come back, she would leave. Everything would be fair. Did you miss him? He arrived the day before the important reception. No, answered Lucy honestly. Today I will work and tomorrow is an important day, he muttered and left. The girl exhaled. She huddled in her corner again and sat there until she wanted to sleep. Then she moved to the couch and fell asleep peacefully. The next day, from the very morning, the preparations began. Victor kept saying something warning. Lucy only nodded her head. She was worried. Going out, he looked at the beautiful companion who was to spend this evening with him. A little anxious, walked Lucy to the car. She was worried about not knowing table etiquette well. She was afraid of embarrassing herself. They arrived. There were already people waiting for them. Almost all were foreigners. Lucy understood what they were talking about. She knew the language, of course. She could not translate all the words, but the essence was clear. At first, they showered her with compliments and told Victor that he was lucky to meet such a girl in his life. It was nice, but it was all false. The dinner continued. The informal talks did too. The man wasn't drinking much today, but it was still there, so Lucy knew there would be those nasty solicitations again. Oh, Lucy heard a familiar voice. Everything trembled inside. It was Anthony. Get away. What are you doing here? She shushed him. She realized that he could ruin the evening. I saw you come in here with that geezer and I thought I'd take a look. He was clearly under the weather. Young man, leave the room. The receptionist approached him. At that moment, Victor stood up and approached Anthony. Get out of here before it gets worse, he told him through gritted teeth. Worse for who? The boy grinned. Guess what? The man saw security approaching them. Did you become an escort? Yelled Anthony as he was led out of the hall. Lucy sat neither alive nor dead. What to do now? This jackass was sure to tell everyone. And even if it wasn't true, they would still believe him. She was ready to cry, but she held back. Those who were sitting at the table saw the whole scene. They couldn't understand what was going on. Victor explained to them that the former suitor was jealous of the girl. Everyone laughed and the dinner continued. But after this incident, the man had a drink. They got into the car and drove home. Strangely enough, Victor sat quietly, so they drove home. What was that? He poured himself another glass. Sorry, it's Anthony, my ex-boyfriend. Lucy realized that today everything would be over, and she was ready to go home herself. And what? Some ragamuffin is better than me? He was coming on to her. Don't, Lucy cried. She pushed him away and ran to the door. You won't regret it? He was lying on the sofa on his side, looking at her. Fuck you. She yanked the door open and ran outside. The girl didn't know where to go. She decided she needed to let Martha know she had done her job. Oh, here she is. The woman looked at the crying girl. Martha, I've done everything. Can I go now? Lucy asked her. Yes, she shook her head. Overjoyed, Lucy went to say goodbye to Ariana and Layla but couldn't find them. She didn't want to get into trouble. She hailed a cab and headed home. As the girl drove home, she was glad that this moment of her life had come to an end. There was only one thing left to do: find out what Anthony would do. Hello, she walked into the dormitory and met an acquaintance. Where have you been? The janitor asked her. I've been wherever I need to be, Lucy answered her rudely. You could have said it normally. She turned away. I'm sorry, Lucy realized she had been rude. The girl changed her clothes in the room. She realized that it was time for exams, and if she did not pass them, she would not be transferred to the next course. The girl decided that she would start preparing from tomorrow. There was a lot of questioning, but the girl just closed herself in her room alone. She didn't know where her roommate was, but neither she nor her things were here. Hello, Lucy woke up to the ringing of the phone. It was her grandmother. Her heart was racing in her chest. She was afraid of what she was going to say to her. Granddaughter, hello. Grandma started normally. Grandma, stop talking, and Lucy herself cried. Anthony came here and said such things about you. The whole village is whispering, said Maria. It's all wrong. He's just jealous. That's why he said all sorts of nasty things, and even resentful of me, practically shouted Lucy. Oh, sighed the woman. What's with you? Heard the girl in the tube, only heavy breathing. Lucy, exhaled the grandmother. I'll be there soon. She hung up the phone, quickly threw everything in her bag, and rushed to the station. The girl dialed the number of her neighbor, told her to call a medic, and hurried to arrive. There was nothing to do before the exams. Now the main thing was to save her grandmother. Lucy realized that after her illness, it could only get worse. Grandmother, she ran into the house. The woman was lying on the bed. She's fine. Her blood pressure is just a little high. I already gave her medicine, said the woman who was a medic. Good. Lucy sat down on the edge of the bed. Is it true what Anthony said about you working? The neighbor wanted to ask, but Lucy didn't let her finish. Enough, she gave her a look that made the women go straight for the exit. So it's true, she heard the girl whisper from the doorway. Lucy realized that if she stayed in the village, neither she nor her grandmother would be given any peace by the people who had heard the news, and they were not fed with bread. Let them muss it up. She had to leave, but now she did not understand where to go. Grandma, don't worry, I'll stay with you, Lucy said. She knew she could think of something. From then on, she just shoved herself away. She took care of her grandmother, stayed home, did all the chores, even went out to the store rarely. Oh, look, went. And where are your suitors? Laughed the neighbors. Lucy did not react to their outburst. She knew everything about herself and did not think that she was doing something very bad. Is there no one to go out to restaurants with? Her classmates greeted her at the gate. Martha was texting her that she was in great demand, and if she didn't mind, she could come back. But Lucy didn't want to answer her. She had done enough of what she had done before. On one of the days the girl sat at home, her grandmother felt better. She began to get up, walked around the house, and only shook her head. How could you? She did not condemn, but did not believe that her granddaughter, who studied and did everything right, became like this. Grandmother, why do you believe them? I did not do anything like that. I did not tell Lucy only one thing, that all this was only for the sake of her, the only native person. And how not to believe you dropped out of school. You did not deny anything. She sighed heavily, and Lucy thought that now something would happen again. There was a knock on the window. The girl looked out. It was Anthony. She decided, to make things worse, to go out to him. She folded her arms across her chest. To you, he was sober today. Here I am, listening to you carefully. I didn't even want to talk to him. Marry me, said, and stood waiting for an answer. And what? You think I will now throw myself on your neck? She laughed at his stupidity. Yes, who will need you after all this? And I love you, he told the girl. Believe me, if no one. It's better to be alone than with someone like you. She turned around to leave. Watch me, he threatened her again. What have I done to you that you're so angry with me? She turned around and glared at him. What do you think you did? He smirked. What? I got in and you didn't? I'm doing well and you're not. Lucy started to step on him. What are you doing? He was backing away. Nothing, envy, a bad feeling. Why did you spread untruths all over the village? Tears stood in his eyes, but the girl held on. Did you have a bad feeling about me? You were attracted to rich people. He snapped at her. Get out of here, so I never see you again. He wanted to spit in the face of this insolent man. The girl returned home, shaking all over. In the morning, when she went to the store, she found that on the gate were written various obscene words. The girl decided that she would not wipe anything down. Let them know that it was not true. Granddaughter, you can't do that. You have to wash it, Maria said. If you start cleaning, they'll think we're hiding the truth and they'll start whispering even more. Maybe we should leave here, Lucy suggested. Where would we go? Grandma was crying. She felt bad. What was the girl to do? She could go to the city herself. There was money to rent a place to live. But how could she leave a native person here? Because she would be imprisoned. Sometimes Lucy went to the bathhouse, closed herself there, and thought. No one could help her. What? She went to look for grooms, or went to the city, missed her profession. Shouted after her, when one day the girl was going to go to the city where she studied. Lucy wanted to know whether she would be reinstated in the institute or not. What do you want? Mind your own business. She looked around. She realized that she should not do it, but she could not keep silent. All the way she cried, but she could not think of anything. The institute said that there were no budgetary places, and if they reinstated her, then only on a paid basis. This did not please. There were things left in the dormitory. Lucy wanted to take them away. She did so and dialed Ariana's number, and today she answered. Where have you been, friend? The girl was glad to hear her call. Are you free tonight? She asked her. Sure, come over. Ariana invited her. And again they sat in a small room, drinking and talking. Listen, why pay attention to all this, especially since you really did almost nothing wrong? The girl said in a high-pitched voice. I can't. I'm ashamed in front of my grandmother, Lucy cried. Oh, and tell her that everything is all right, and you did it only for her sake. These were the words I didn't want to say. The girl sat for a while longer, went to bed. In the morning, Ariana had to leave. She told Lucy that she could stay with her, but she did not agree. Where are you going? She turned to Lucy in surprise. Today, I will rent a hotel for a couple of days. I need to think. And then back to my grandmother, the girl admitted. That's what she did. The room was nice, cozy, and comfortable. Lucy took a shower. When she came out of it, she saw that she had a message. It was Anthony again. He wrote different nasty things. He also attached pictures, which he made in such a way that it was obvious they were not real. Lucy threw the phone down and cried. Why all this? I am a disgrace to the family. Why live? She stood in front of the mirror and shouted to herself. Then she took a pair of scissors and stabbed herself in the wrist. It hurt. And then Lucy fiercely began to stab at that spot until she lost consciousness. The hotel staff first heard screaming from her room, and then there was the sound of something falling. One of the staff rushed to the door, opened it with his key, and saw the girl on the floor. An ambulance was immediately called. The paramedics took Lucy to the hospital. What happened to you? The medic talked to her after the girl regained consciousness. Nothing. She looked away. Okay, he left the room. And then the staff came in, wanting to know if she had done it herself or if someone had. Lucy looked at them and smiled. Last came the psychiatrists, who were also curious about everything. She had been checked in while it was too early to go to the hospital. The girl spent a few days in the ward, soon to be discharged. Anthony continued to write. It was unclear what he wanted to do. Lucy lay on the bed and looked at the ceiling. She did not understand what to do now, and who could help her. Victor, it dawned on her, he could prove that she was just accompanying him, and they had nothing. But how to call him? since they had broken up on such a bad note. She picked up her phone, scrolled through her contacts, reached the letter B, stopped. Lucy stared at the contact for a few minutes and finally pressed the call button. He didn't answer for a long time. The girl already wanted to press reset. "Hello," she heard when she had already removed the phone from her ear. "Victor, hello, it's Lucy. I need your help," she said. "If it has to do with the doctors, I have nothing to do with it." He answered her strangely. No, wait. She wanted to tell him that they needed to meet so he could come to the hospital, but at that moment she felt funny. After all, the man had just said something about doctors. Well, what else? He was waiting. "If you need, I can still escort you somewhere for free, just to do something for me," she begged. "Okay, where are you?" he asked. "At the hospital," Lucy said quietly, afraid he would hang up on her. "What's wrong with you?" The man must have been afraid of some kind of disease. "I hurt my hand," she admitted to him. "Well, tomorrow morning they'll come for you." He hung up the phone before he got the address. Lucy began to think of a plan of action, what she would say to the man, how she would introduce him to her grandmother, and what they would do there. The girl went through various options for a long time. Finally, she thought everything through, as it seemed to her, and fell asleep. "Good morning." The nurse came to her room in the morning. "Thank you." Though the girl was nervous, it was her only way out, to rub the nose of the whole village, and especially Anthony. The girl said hello, got into the car, and they drove to an address she already knew. The closer they got, the more everything inside began to shake. Now Lucy didn't know if she had made the right decision. "Hello," greeted the man as she entered the house. "I apologize for calling so brazenly, but I really need help. I'm ready to do anything." She stood in front of him. "Tell me first what happened." He went into the kitchen, Lucy following him. When she finished telling, the man sat opposite and shook his head, then looked at the girl and smiled. "What?" She didn't understand. "I have a business proposition for you," he said as if he was talking at some serious negotiations. "Whatever. The main thing is your help to me," she repeated for the second time. "So, you agree to marry me?" At that moment, Lucy's eyes widened. She hadn't expected that. "Why?" She was struck to the core, because it was serious. "Listen to me, and then you will talk yourself," the man resented. "That's it. I'll shut up." She covered her mouth with her hand. "You and I conclude a contract on mutually beneficial terms. You become my wife, I fully provide for you, and do everything you say." He looked at her, waiting for at least a nod of the head. "What's next?" she wondered. "And what then? Now I help you. And then everything, a life together. I need you because you are beautiful. The last contract we made was very successful. You impressed everyone," he explained. "Okay, I agree." She didn't care anymore. Now it was necessary to talk things through, what and how they would tell people. "And what exactly do you want from me?" he asked. "I don't care what anyone else thinks, as long as Grandma knows I didn't do anything like that. It's just that we met and you asked me to accompany you, and I help as a good acquaintance. And if we tell you that we're getting married soon, then everything will be fine," the girl said quickly. "I understand you, only while I do not have time for all this, can we delay a little?" He looked at his schedule. Of course, Lucy was already happy about that too. "What are you planning to do now?" He was curious. "Probably go to my grandmother's." She lowered her eyes. "I don't think she'll meet you with that and not be upset." He pointed to her hand. "You're right." She touched the bandage. "You can stay here. I promise I won't touch it." He set the empty coffee cup on the table and headed for the exit. "Should I make something?" she said when the man was already in the doorway. "Do whatever you want." Victor left. Lucy didn't know whether to be happy about what had just happened or laugh. On the one hand, Victor would do whatever she told him to do, but on the other hand, she'd have to become his wife, which wasn't very happy. At first, she wanted to call Ariana and tell all this, but then she changed her mind. She knows less, sleeps better. That was the girl's conclusion. "So what do we have here?" She opened the refrigerator. Like last time, there was a lot of things. The girl decided to cook borscht. Maybe rich people don't eat it, but it was necessary to surprise them. She worked on the stove for several hours. When finally everything was ready, she tasted it, realized that it was very tasty, closed the lid, and left the kitchen. Victor didn't arrive very late. "I made borscht," Lucy said when he was still on the doorstep. Great, help yourself, the man smiled. Lucy noticed that their relationship now was not the same as it had been when he paid her, but that was a good thing. Bon appetit. She put a plate in front of him. Along with that, she served sour cream and pampushki with garlic. He closed his eyes. It's the only time I've ever had borscht like this. I'm glad I obliged. My cheeks flushed crimson. Thanks, I'd eat more, but I can't. He patted his stomach. So they stayed in the same house for a few days. When the wound on the girl's arm was healed, she took off the bandage. Can you see it? She asked the man. If you don't know, you won't notice it. Just some scratches. He looked at the girl's wrist. Okay, then I'll go now. I need to warn my grandmother, and then you come, she wrote him where. Agreed. Victor said he would be in the village in about a week. On the familiar route, she went to the place where she was definitely waited for. When she approached the house, she met well-wishers again, who began to say nasty things in her wake. Soon you will know how wrong you were, she turned to them. Yes, your rich clients will come, they hissed back. They would. Lucy walked with her head held high. She walked to the gate, on which bad words were again inscribed, pressed her lips together, and entered the wicket. Grandma was in the house. She was lying on the bed again. Hi, Grandma, are you not feeling well? Saw the granddaughter this and ran up to her. Oh, everyone talks and talks, sighed Maria. Do not pay attention to it. The girl went to the kitchen to bring water to her grandmother. How can I ignore it if that's all they talk about, she cried. Can you get up? The girl asked her something else. Of course I can. She started to get up. Good, we'll soon have guests, Lucy smiled. Who is it? Maria was surprised. My fiancé. Her granddaughter didn't brag, but it looked like it. Wow, shook her grandmother's head. After that, they started to cook something while talking a lot. The woman kept grumbling. Why did she go to this city? It always turns out that way, even if you are the best. Grandma, people's envy knows no bounds, said the granddaughter. Yes, there is a place for that too, agreed with her. In the evening, they all continued their conversations. Tell me about the groom, the grandmother asked. What to tell about him? He is a grown man who helped me a lot, Lucy said quietly. She didn't want to deceive her grandmother, but it turned out that way, and sometimes a sweet lie is better than the bitter truth. Everything is clear that nothing is clear, grandmother as if hesitated in the words of her granddaughter. They separated by rooms, or rather, Lucy went to her own, and the grandmother remained still there. The girl lay on the bed and thought why she had thought of all this. She lived and lived. Then something happened. Tears rolled from her eyes by themselves. Lucy didn't notice how she fell asleep. Granddaughter, wake up. Her grandmother woke her up in the morning, just like when she was a child. My grandmother, the girl stretched out her arms to her. Let's go to the kitchen. I've already prepared everything there, the woman said. The rest of the day was like yesterday. They talked, did something, and then went to their rooms. Finally, it was Friday, and Victor was due to arrive on Saturday. Lucy from the morning was very worried how his grandmother would perceive him, what he would say, how would she behave. All these thoughts were in the girl's head. She could not sleep all night. In the morning, she got up. Her head hurt a lot. She ran from window to window, looking to see if the man had arrived. Toward lunchtime, Lucy heard the gate slam. She ran outside. Yes, it was him. Hello, she opened the door to his house. What roads you have here? Victor looked around, sat down on one of the chairs that were here. I said you were my fiancé. Lucy blushed after saying that. For the most part you are, he smiled at her. Grandma will be here in a moment. The woman had just recently left for the store. Good, he began to look around. Lucy started setting the table with what was in the house. The first thing she put on the table was the teacups, then the kettle, and the plate of cakes that had been made in the morning. After that, she sat down at the table herself. It was unusual. The gate slammed again. There's Grandma, she said, and jumped to her feet again. Why are you so worried? Victor couldn't understand. I don't know. The girl twisted her fingers. Sit down. Now we'll tell everything, and it will be fine, he asked her. Grandma, the woman entered the house at that moment. Oh, the guests are already here and good luck to you. The woman saw that the man is much older than her granddaughter. She did not like it very much. My name is Victor, I have come specially to tell you that your granddaughter is not guilty of anything. He began at once without any backstory. I'm Maria. She began to look at the man's face. Something in it seemed familiar to her. So, Lucy and I met in the city. I liked her immediately. Young, active, I decided to ask her for a favor, which your neighbor took not quite as it should be. The man said and said, Victor, you say. Began to breathe heavily. Grandmother. She wanted to get up, but could not do it. Grandma, what's wrong with you? Lucy ran up to her. Now Victor got up to help. They put the woman on the bed. The girl dialed the medic. She lived close by, so she came quickly. The woman stared at the man before examining Maria. Hurry, Lucy hurried her. We need to get to the hospital right away. The woman only glanced at her grandmother. Can we go in your car? The girl looked at the guest. Of course, hurried Victor. They helped Maria down from the porch. Half-Line placed her in the car. Lucy sat and stroked her grandmother. Be patient, sweetheart. She stroked her hair. She tried to say something, but it was all mumbling. What's wrong with her? A man looked over to them. I don't know. Let's hurry, Lucy said. Let's go as fast as we can, see what gullies there are. He pointed out the window. She was surprised, went into the room, put everything in, and came out. Hello, said the man. Finally, they arrived in the city. In a few minutes, they were at the hospital. Victor helped in everything. It was pleasant to the girl. I guess I'll stay here for now, she looked at him. Okay, but remember that I have fulfilled my part of the agreement. Now it's your turn. He turned around and walked down the hall. I remember everything, Lucy said quietly as he walked away. And why did she do all this? Once again realized that the girl was wrong. Well, they said about her and would say, why all this concert made it worse. She sat there and blamed herself. The doctor said that she could go home. If there was anything new, she would definitely be called and informed. Okay, thank you. She didn't want to leave. She called him as they had agreed, and again the car was at the hospital. What's wrong with Grandma? He asked her when she entered the house. I don't know. They told me to go home. As soon as there is a change, I will be informed. She sat down on a chair and cried. You don't need that here. He handed her a napkin. I'm sorry, I felt really bad inside. I wanted to scream and cry. Shall I pour you a drink? Victor asked. Lucy wanted to agree to this proposal, but she stopped herself because she thought he would start pestering. Don't worry, I won't pester. He realized what she was thinking. Okay, a little is okay, she nodded then. The man splashed some champagne into her glass, not champagne at all, handed it to her, and made her drink it. You'll see, it'll get easier, he told her when Lucy started to refuse. All right, she clucked and took a sip. Victor looked at her and waited for her to feel better. Thanks, she said in response. He smiled, went to the kitchen, and brought her some lemon. Brr. Lucy ate it and cringed. So I'd helped you. Now it's time to fulfill the demands on your part, the man told her. I'd already agreed. What else do you want from me? She didn't understand. You will live in this house. Now there will be active preparations for the wedding. This event will also be to my advantage. I will invite all the partners there so that they will see that I am not some kind of a swindler, but a normal, serious person. He made a smart look. I got it. Lucy sat back in her chair. The strong alcohol had taken its toll on her, and she had fallen asleep. The master noticed it, came up to her, wanted to take her in his arms, but she refused, and he simply escorted her to the bedroom. Now Lucy was no longer huddled in that chair and on that sofa where she had been the first time, but slept on a regular bed. In the morning, when she woke up, it took her a long time to realize where she was. But when Victor looked into the room, she remembered everything. Tears immediately sprang to her eyes. I need to go to my grandmother today, she told him. The car is at your disposal. You can go anywhere you want, he told her. Can I ask you something? He wanted to get out, but she stopped him with her words. Yes, of course, he looked at her. You won't hit on me before the wedding, will you? She was ashamed to ask this question, but it had to be voiced. Okay, whatever you say, he smirked and left the room. After that, the girl washed her face. She went to the kitchen and made breakfast. Since Victor was already gone, she had to sit at the table alone and eat breakfast. Then she changed her clothes, went outside, told the driver where to go, and they went to the hospital. Doctor, tell me, how is my grandmother? she saw a man. "I told you, if there's any change, I'll call you. As long as her condition is critical, I can't tell you anything. Even if we start the operation now, she may not survive," he told her. "Thank you." She sat down on the couch, feeling just awful. Lucy came home, and to keep herself busy, she started cooking. She cooked so much it made her laugh. Victor returned in the evening. He looked at the set table, where there were a lot of dishes. Then he looked at Lucy. "Are we expecting someone?" he asked her. "No, the hospital told me today that my grandmother wasn't getting better, so I decided to distract myself," she told him the truth. Just transferring groceries, he looked at the table again. "Sorry," she didn't have any more words. "Okay, don't give me any apologies here. We have a very important meeting in a week's time, so you need to be at your best," he told her. "I got it." She went to her room after dinner. The words "all armed" meant that Lucy had to be well dressed, looking fresh, with a nice hairdo and everything else that went into it. All week the girl sat at home. She did not go out anywhere, waiting for the call from the hospital. She realized that just to go, it would already be ridiculous. "Are you ready?" Victor came into her room just as they agreed. "Can't you see?" A gorgeous girl in a beautiful dress stood in front of him. "You're very beautiful," he told her. "Thank you." She was embarrassed. They arrived at the restaurant, and when the meeting had already started, Lucy saw her old acquaintance Ariane at the end of the hall. For some reason, she was so excited about this meeting that she couldn't help but approach her. "Victor, can I step aside for a few seconds?" she said to him. "Sure, why do you ask?" He turned to her and looked at the others who were sitting at the table. He started to smile. She saw that Ariana saw her too, made a gesture for her to come over, and together they went to the ladies' room. "Hi, friend. What are you doing here?" Ariana was very surprised. "I have such circumstances." Lucy told her story, of course, not in detail, in brief, but everything was clear. "Wow," she stretched out. It was obvious that in these words there was a drop of envy. "Believe me, there is nothing good in it," Lucy told her. "Don't say that." The acquaintance made a sad face. They talked some more and then went to their own tables. "Who was that?" Victor asked, so that no one could hear them. "Let me tell you everything at home." Lucy turned to him. She didn't want to explain herself now. "Well, at home, so at home," he agreed. When the negotiations were over, everyone went home, including Victor and Lucy. Strangely enough, Victor kept his promise. He hadn't consumed anything the whole evening, and now they arrived home quietly, nothing like it had been before. As they sat in the kitchen and discussed tonight, the man reminded the girl that she had promised to tell him about the person she had met at the restaurant. "It was an old acquaintance of mine who brought me to the place where you found me," she confessed to him, though she was ashamed. "That's it. You don't have to tell me anymore," he stopped her. After that, they both went to their rooms. Lucy laid down on the bed, but she couldn't sleep. All sorts of thoughts came into her head. She tossed from side to side, realizing that she wouldn't look good tomorrow, but Victor hadn't said they were going out. She fell asleep only when the first rays of the sun were already outside the window. But she didn't get much sleep. The phone rang. "Hello," she said into the receiver. "Hello, Lucy. I'm calling you about your grandmother." She heard a man's voice in the receiver. "Yes, what's wrong with her? Is she better? Is there any change?" She started pelting him with questions. "Unfortunately, I can't tell you anything. Your grandmother is no longer with us," he told her in a quiet voice. "No, it can't be," screamed Lucy into the phone. She was shaking. She didn't understand how. How could this happen? Why she was pulled out of so many situations. And now, what happened? She didn't even bother to change her clothes. She ran down to the first floor where Victor was drinking coffee. "What's wrong?" He looked at her. "Grandma, Grandma, Grandma, Grandma," she wailed. "What about Grandma?" He didn't understand. "She died today in the hospital. Now I got a call. She showed me the phone." "I see," Victor sighed. It seemed that he too was already regretting that he had taken all this on himself. "We'll go after her, won't we?" She waited for the man's answer. "Of course we will." He put the cup down and sent Lucy to change while he started making phone calls. "Thank you so much. You're so helpful," she told him. "It's okay," he told her, and then he stopped looking at her. "What?" She didn't understand. "It turns out that in connection with the funeral of your grandmother, We will have to postpone the wedding. He knew such omens. I promise I'll do what I told you, she nodded, and there was no room for those thoughts. Victor paid for everything. They picked up their grandmother and took her to the village so her friends could say goodbye to her. Victor and Lucy sat in the house. The girl was wearing a black scarf, tears streaming down her face, and he didn't know what to do to support her. Why did she die? Why did she get sick? It was when you arrived that it happened. Maybe you said something to her or did something wrong. Lucy sobbed and assumed different options. I didn't do anything to anyone. Do you want to blame me for your grandmother's death? He didn't understand her. No, I don't want to blame you for anything. She realized she was wrong. Then what? Before he could say anything, a man in a cap walked into the house. Hey boss, how long can the car can stand? Let's go to the cemetery already, he said to him. Well, shall we go? Victor turned to her. Yes, of course, let's go. Everyone who wanted to loaded into the car, the rest into the bus. They drove to the local cemetery. What happened there? Lucy couldn't remember very well. Someone said words. Someone felt sorry for her. That sort of thing. When it was all over, people were invited to the dining room so they could memorialize Maria. That was it. I was left alone, looking at Victor with Lucy's glassy eyes. Why alone? You have me. He took her hand. It's not real. She was in such a state that she was about to become hysterical. Yeah, it's not real, but if you wanted to, you could do it differently, he told her. You know what? Why don't we go to the cemetery? Lucy told him. What cemetery? It's practically nighttime. He looked out the window. How about tomorrow morning? She looked hopeful. I didn't want to stay here, he told her. Please, I have to go to my mom's, Lucy asked him. All right, tomorrow morning we'll go to my mom's and then we'll go home right away, agreed. Agreed, she nodded her head. After that, Lucy went to her room and asked Victor not to disturb her. And again until the morning she could not sleep a wink because she felt very sorry for herself. First of all, she had no one left. She was alone, and she felt sorry for her grandmother. She couldn't understand. Why then, when she had the attack, she had made it through, and now what had happened? Now in the morning, when it was still very early, she got up, went to the kitchen, made coffee. She and Victor drank a cup each. Well, shall we go? He asked her. Let's go, she said. They got in the car and drove again to where they had been just yesterday. Lucy quickly found her mother's grave. They walked up there with Victor. Hi, Mommy. I'm sorry I didn't go to see you for so long, and now I probably won't come for a long time yet. The girl leaned over the monument to kiss the picture. Is that your mother? Stared Victor at her. Yes, why are you so surprised? She didn't understand. Selena was my first girlfriend, he said. There's no such thing. Lucy smiled back at him. Well, as you can see, it does, stood the flabbergasted man himself. So first you were friends with my mother, and after all these years you met me, and now you take me as your wife. She couldn't believe it. Do you know who your father is? He asked her at that moment. Redness ran down the man's cheeks. There is a picture somewhere in the house, Lucy remembered. My grandmother always showed it to me. Would you be able to find it now? He pestered her with the question. Well, I don't know. I guess I can. She didn't understand what the man was getting at. They drove quickly. He got into the car, Lucy too, closed the doors and drove off. He was in a hurry, doing everything ahead of her. They ran into the house. So where could the pictures be? He asked her man. She calmly went to the chest of drawers where her grandmother kept her things. She opened one locker, took out an iron box, and started going through the photos. Some of them were of her mom, where she was little with her, and she held her gaze on them. Yes, then you'll look at all this. Victor couldn't wait for her to find a picture. And the girl pulled out the picture that was at the very bottom. It was black and white, washed out, showed it to him. Look at it, he told her. So, Lucy stared at the picture. You don't recognize it, because that's the picture your grandmother said your father was talking about, right? Lucy looked at the picture again and realized that it was Victor. At that moment, the girl cried. Why she didn't say before she died that she recognized you. It must have made her feel so bad. Lucy guessed now. So that's it. Let's leave it for later. Let's go. All the way the man was silent. He was just in shock. It was impossible to put it into words, but it could still turn out that it wasn't true. They were just friends. I just kept the picture. I told my mother he was the father because I didn't want to tell her. When they were in town, they immediately went to the clinic where Victor wanted to take a paternity test. Everything was ready. They drove back home. God, I don't even know how to address you now. Why I was such a fool. He grabbed his head and spoke without stopping. Calm down already. You didn't know. I didn't know. Who would have thought that in such a big city two people would meet and it would turn out that they are father and daughter? She calmed him. No, I still don't believe it. Why did I do that? You. He remembered kissing her. Be thankful that we haven't had anything yet. Now Lucy felt like a queen in this situation, that she didn't let anything happen to her. Yes, even what we had was already enough. Victor couldn't come to his senses. They arrived home. He immediately took out a bottle. Lucy looked at him with frightened eyes. He drank 2 shots in a row because the situation was not in his head. All this time, Lucy and Victor lived together. They didn't discuss much because Victor insisted on waiting for the result. If the result was positive, he would lay the world at his daughter's feet. If it was negative, they would decide what to do next. Now they were 2 independent people who simply lived in the same house. Finally, one morning, Victor's phone rang. It was a call from the clinic. Yes, only Lucy heard him answer. What did they tell you? She was curious too. Let's go. The tests are ready. They were in the car again, driving to the clinic again. They took the envelope. Victor printed the envelope and squeezed his eyes shut. When he opened his eyes and saw the result, he rolled up that piece of paper, put it back in the envelope, turned around in the back seat. Hello, daughter, he said to her. Was it really true? Lucy still couldn't believe it. As you can see, he handed her the papers. How do you live with yourself? All my life, I was told my father was dead or something, and I believed it. My grandmother showed me this picture a couple times, said you were my father. But when I asked her for it, she never gave it to me again. And now, she stopped talking, tears streaming down her cheeks. Daughter, you said you were alone, but you're not alone, you have me. I'll tell you more, you still have a grandmother, and you also have an aunt, Victor told her. Still, I don't believe it. She turned away to the window, crying and crying. When they arrived home, Victor went to his office and invited Lucy there. Why did you call me here? She asked. I want to tell you our story. I'm sorry, daughter. It's all my fault, the man told her. What's your fault? She didn't want to hear what he was going to tell her. Do you realize how stony I feel right now? Victor was really sitting there all white. Okay, I'm listening, Lucy told him. My father had a good position at the factory, so when I graduated from school, he immediately put me in the same place where he worked, and not a small position. Frankly speaking, I enjoyed all the benefits of life. I could not go to work. I did not go. I could have fun in the evening. I had fun. You could say I lived on a wide lake. The man was silent. It was obvious that it was difficult for him to tell this story. And what happened next? Where and when you met my mother? I wanted to finish the conversation quickly. She was a student at some unassuming technical school. I didn't know it then. We were out at some company and she came there with her friends. To be honest, I didn't care, but everyone started pairing up. And it just so happened that Selena and I ended up together. Yeah, I think I'm a jerk now, but I was having so much fun back then. I wasn't thinking about anything. I don't know why she believed me, but we spent that night together. And not just that night, but the next few. And then I found out that she had graduated from that very technical school and was looking for a job. Of course, I didn't want to leave her in distress, or maybe something else. I wanted to show off. I asked my father and he got her a job at the same place where we worked. She worked. We kept seeing each other. But one day I got an offer to start my own business. I had a friend who was doing all this. I didn't refuse. I invested. And it turns out I never saw Selena again. The business started to flourish. Money came in. Naturally, there was drinking, partying, and a whole other relationship. Not even 3 months later, when she came to me and said that she was expecting a child, he was silent again, sighed heavily, left the office, and when he came back in his hands again was a bottle. Well, what happened next? Finish it. Did you quit or what? You sent her to the village. How did it happen? Lucy already wanted to hear the whole story. Well, what about her? It was like Lucy was nudging him to keep talking. What about her? She couldn't do anything. Because I asked my father to fire her, and he did. He couldn't help his son. What happened next, I don't know. I guess she went to her village, and how she died, I don't know that either. He poured the glass again and drank it. I'll tell you. Then Mom came to the village. You can imagine how the locals jumped on her when they saw her with a belly. They said all sorts of things. And when I was born, Mommy decided to commit suicide. Lucy was having a hard time talking too. Tears were flowing from her eyes again. Victor slid a glass to her. Drink it, it will be easier, he asked her. Thank you, I'm fine. So I don't know what pills she found there, but she drank them all. Lucy tilted her head, and at that moment she realized that she really needed a drink. Good for you, Victor told her, but you said your mother died when you were 6 years old. Yes, she did it earlier. She didn't die, but she damaged something in her body. After that, she got very sick. First one organ failed, then another. And in the end, I have not yet gone to the first grade, and I did not have a mommy. Looked at him with such anger that he was ready to fall under the ground. I'm sorry, daughter. He took her hands. Of course, where can I go now? She said with such anger that it was impossible not to hear. I thank fate that nothing terrible happened. He put his hands together, and I could have done such things. He sat there and couldn't even imagine it. After this conversation, Lucy wanted to leave, but the man wouldn't let her go. Where are you going to go? To that village where everyone talks nonsense about you? He stopped her. But I don't want to stay with you either. She looked at him with that murderous look again. Lucy, you're my only child. You know I can't do anything else. Now that I've found you, I don't want to lose you again. I begged her to stay. Okay, I'll stay, even though I have no desire to. She went back to her room, and now she knew that no one would touch her here. The next day at breakfast, they started talking about their studies. Would you like to graduate from your institute? He asked her. Of course, but I've already found out that I will not be accepted on the budget, only on a fee, she sighed. And what problems? You'll study on a fee. He was ready now for everything for the sake of his daughter. Thank you. If you do it, I will be very grateful, she thanked him. So about the study agreed. Let's go on. He made some notes in his diary. What's next? She didn't understand. We have decided on the housing. You will live with me, study at the institute. And now I want to ask you about all my property, which will soon be yours. Looked questioningly, man. What are you saying? Why soon? She didn't understand. With my way of life, it is not a fact that I will last long. For some reason, he was sure of it. Okay, I agree to everything, but let's talk about the will later, said the girl. Okay, agreed. Now get ready. We'll go to your grandmother, he called her. Lucy, all this was unusual and interesting to meet a man who was her relative, but she had never seen him. So the girl quickly packed. They drove. The woman lived not so far away. And when her son arrived at her place with a young girl, the latter immediately made an unpleasant face. Mom, don't make such a face, Victor told her. Why? Should I meet you again with another underage girl? Without embarrassing anyone, the woman said. You won't believe it. It's your granddaughter, he told her. What are you talking about? What granddaughter? You've never even had a wife. You've only got little girls on your mind. And if any of them had given birth, the granddaughter would not be exactly as old as she is now. The woman did not believe him. We'll come in and tell you everything, he told her. All right, come in. But if it is not true, you get up and get out. It was obvious that the woman did not believe her son for a long time. They went to the kitchen. Lucy was mostly silent. Only Victor spoke. Of course, you don't know this girl, but my father, if he were alive, would prove to you that we were seeing Selena. I asked him to do something for me back then. So just recently, we met Lucy, and when her grandmother died, I realized that her mother Selena was the girl. He put the envelope with the DNA test on the table. The mother took it in her hands, read the whole thing, looked over at Lucy, and made big eyes. I'm sorry, baby, she said, and went over and hugged her. It's okay, I still can't accept it myself, Lucy told her. Why are we just sitting here? I've made pies since morning. The woman began to put various treats on the table. Don't have any, Lucy stopped her. How could I not? Of course you should. How could I not treat my granddaughter, whom I saw for the first time? The woman could not keep silent. Why don't we call Kathy? Victor suggested. Sure, now we'll call her. The woman took the phone and dialed her daughter's number. After a short conversation, she turned to everyone smiling. She had the same reaction as me, the mother said. Not an hour later, another woman arrived. She was looking at Lucy. I couldn't believe it until they told her the same story and showed her all the forensics. After that, she cried. You've been a dummy since you were a kid, she said to her brother. But now everything will be different. Believe me, he answered the women. All sat down at the table, began to talk, asking Lucy how things were, what and what. In the evening, when she and Victor were driving home, she turned to him. Lucy had wanted to tell him about it for a long time, but she hadn't dared to. Please don't tell anyone where we met, okay? I'm ashamed, she asked him. Those memories were the hardest. When she thought about it, she not only blushed, everything inside clenched. You what if I tell any of my relatives where we met, then not only you, but also I will be ashamed. They drove home in silence. There, as usual, each went to his own room. In the morning, the doorbell rang. Lucy did not hurry to open it because she realized that no one could come here to her. She just stepped out of her room to look. I'll get it, her father told her and went to the door. He would never have done that before, but now he realized that he had to do it so his daughter wouldn't feel slighted. Anthony stood on the threshold. Victor recognized him because he remembered his face at the restaurant. Can I see Lucy? He asked him, standing with a cocky grin himself, waiting. You got the nerve to come to my house to meet her, didn't you? The man asked him, anger boiling up inside him. Why can't I see my girlfriend? The guy asked cheekily. Listen, get out of here, Victor asked him nicely. And what will happen then? He cackled and spit on the ground. You'll see if you don't get out of here right now, the man threatened him. He was ready to grab him by the scruff of the neck and carry him to the gate himself. At that moment, Lucy was coming down the steps and saw the young man. At first, she was surprised at the insolence of the guy, but then she smiled because she thought of something. Daddy, wait, don't send him away, she shouted, because she wanted everyone to hear. What did you say? Both Victor, who was surprised to be called that for the first time, and Anthony, who was surprised that it could be his father. Yes, that's my father, surprised, she asked him. Lucy did it on purpose to make him realize that he was wrong to insult her and tell various tales in the village. Of course, in fact, it was unknown why Anthony came, but when he realized that it was Lucy's father and not her suitor, he immediately changed his anger into mercy. The boy smiled and called the girl out for a walk. What? After all that you did for me, I have to go out with you, and then you go to the village again and start spreading rumors about me. She looked at him with dislike. Lucy, he said to her, he who remembers the past will be the one who gets the eye, he said. And not only that, but all out, she told him and closed the door. What, when he found out that your father is a rich Pinocchio, he decided to impose himself as a groom, suggested Victor. I don't know, maybe. Lucy answered him and laughed. The very next day, she went to the institute and applied. She was reinstated. Because she studied well, she was allowed to retake the exams of the first year, and she successfully went straight to the second. Her father rejoiced at his daughter's success. She finally had a good life. Thank you, Mom, for giving birth to me with Victor. Now, when you were gone, he just appeared on my way, as if he knew that I would be hard. She sat in the evening at the window and talked aloud, and that's when she noticed a star had fallen in the sky. A tear rolled down Lucy's cheek, but she knew she was going to be okay. May I? Her father came into the room. He wanted to socialize with her, but he was afraid Lucy wouldn't accept him, so now to do anything he always asked. Yes, the girl turned to him and smiled through her tears. She forgave him. It was better to have such relatives than none at all. What are you doing? He sat down next to her. The father wanted to be involved in his daughter's life. Yes, he hadn't raised her since birth, but now he was ready for anything. Nothing. Thinking over everything that had happened in the last few months, she hugged the man for the first time. My darling, what have we almost done to you? Kissed her on the cheek. Her father kissed her. They sat on the windowsill, even though it was very late. The man was glad that he had one most dear little person on earth for whom he could do anything. Lucy, who at first thought she hated this man, now realized that this was her only soulmate. And even though he was not with her for so many years, today the girl forgave him and decided to communicate with her grandmother and aunt. Hello, She called every day to the woman. "Honey, come." Grandma was always happy when Lucy came to visit her. "Why haven't you been in touch with your daddy?" a girl once asked her. "Oh, it's a long story, but I'll tell it to you someday." Lucy felt like a child again, surrounded by these people. Her grandmother gave her advice. Her aunt accompanied her if necessary. Her father supported her in everything. "Let's go to Mom's cemetery," she asked Victor one day. Well, he knew what he wanted to say to this woman. They arrived, first went to Grandma's house and then came to Selena's. "Hi, Mom," kissed Lucy's picture as usual. She stroked the monument, threw out the old flowers and put in new ones. Victor sat in the car the whole time. He said he wouldn't come out because he was hurt and offended. The girl then still wondered why, but he didn't tell her anything. Lucy saw the man get out of it, pulled a large bouquet of roses out of the trunk, and walked over. She wondered when he'd had time to buy them, but it didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that he was here and now, next to her, and she wanted her mother to see that they were together. Victor came over. He looked at the monument for a long time and then leaned over and kissed the photo too, just like the girl did. "Thank you for the daughter." He put flowers to her saree. After these words, Victor hugged his daughter and cried. Elizabeth was sure as soon as her husband came home and ate a plate of her specialty borscht with smoked brisket, they immediately reconciled. Borscht was her best dish, and cooking it was always akin to meditation for her. Fry the onions until golden. Slice the cabbage so thin that it was almost like threads. Add a pinch of sugar right after the tomato paste to balance the flavor. Harvey always ate borscht with great appetite and joked that it tasted like a restaurant. And then sometimes, if he was in a good mood, he would sit his wife on his lap and say that he loved her very much, that he was so lucky to have her. Only lately such closeness between the spouses had not happened for a long time, and Elizabeth began to think that she had forgotten what it was like when her own husband hugged her. And it all began with the fact that they quarreled, and Elizabeth did not understand whether that occasion was worth it to forget everything that was between them. After all, she was genuinely worried about her husband, so she found out how he was doing at work, tried to give useful advice. In general, Harvey did not like to share with her the details of his affairs, but she knew that he had parked a working truck unsuccessfully, so it happened that it drove into the chief's car, which from the collision of the bumper became like a crumpled tin can. Harvey was only partly to blame. That day the asphalt in the city suddenly froze, and the janitor, responsible for the order, specifically in that parking lot, was completely unprepared for it. But the chief did not want to listen to anything and shook with Harvey compensation, which was equal to the salary for 2 months. Elizabeth could understand why her husband's mood became disgusting, but could not understand. And on her why get angry? And only much later, looking back, she realized it was another grain of sand in the avalanche that their family relationship was collapsing altogether. But right now Elizabeth was not going to give up so easily. That's why she cooked her specialty borscht. Looking at the clock, her husband was late. Finally, it was time to throw in a pot of crushed garlic and leave it on a hot stove, let it infuse. Elizabeth took off her apron and hurried to her room to change. She chose a fitted dress of sky blue silk with small white polka dots. She twirled in front of the mirror, ran her palms over her figure, evaluating herself. Then she took off the headband, unraveled 2 spirals of hair, pulling them apart into careless curls, went over them lightly with a comb and added a little crimson and scarlet lipstick to her lips. Now she was good. From the hallway came the sound of keys jingling outside the front door. Harvey was back. Elizabeth, with the joy of a bird ready to greet the sun at the dawn of a new day, fluttered out to greet him. Her heart beat joyfully as it had the day he had asked her to be his wife. There had been misunderstandings, resentments. Let them be. But it's time to leave that in the past. And today it's time to start anew. How could it be otherwise? Elizabeth smiled as Harvey gave her a renewed life, feeling she had never known she had, and for that she was eternally grateful. Now they would make up and all would be well. A smile froze on Elizabeth's face when a girl walked through the door, ahead of her husband. A short, tight black dress, legs in boots, and black tights with stiletto heels as thin as matchsticks. The girl smelled of a sweet, sweet perfume. She was smiling too, but she suddenly turned down when she saw the landlady. "You said you were alone." She turned to the man. Harvey grinned crookedly, the way he did when he'd had a stiff drink. His palm slapped the girl's lower back, pushing her forward. And I'm alone. It's like furniture. Don't mind me. Go to the bedroom and get undressed. Elizabeth felt so strange, or rather aloof, as if she was forced to watch a movie, and she didn't understand the plot yet, but only guessed that it was an abomination. What are you staring at? Her husband swayed, leaned his shoulder against the wall, awkwardly pulling off his shoes. Did you think I'd put up with your antics? Did you think I'm not a man? You're not a woman. He spat out angrily and pulled down his pants after his shoes. If it weren't for the context of the situation, it would have looked comical. A man in a sweater, jacket, hat, and underpants with frogs. Harvey sniffed his nose and smelled the aroma of soup. Go on, finish your borscht and stay put. I'll finish it. He grinned again. I'll eat. And you think I decided to make room in my bunk, so you have no right to complain. With these words, he went through the corridor and slammed the door to the bedroom, where the girl had hidden earlier, so hard that the plaster almost fell from the ceiling. Elizabeth stood in the same place, frozen as if her whole body had turned to stone. She tried to think, but instead she felt her heart pounding with frightening clarity, and it felt like her heart was going to jump out of her chest. She raised her hand and pressed her palm to her neck, as if checking what was in the way, why she couldn't breathe normally, what was choking her. Her cheeks became wet. Elizabeth wondered which of her neighbors had a dog whining so pitifully, long and lonely, bursting into tears. And the next moment she realized that it was she herself who was howling. And in general, she is already sitting on the floor, hunched over. And it seems that if it gets even a little bit worse, although it seems that there is nowhere else, she will simply disappear, dissolve from her grief, evaporate like a fog. But it didn't happen in a minute, not after 10. The stove beeped from the kitchen, announcing that the buns with herbs, which she was going to serve with the borscht, were baked. She rose. Sounds came to her ears. A mishmash of sounds from the bedroom, and Elizabeth wondered aloofly how good her hearing was. She sighed, now without hysterics, evenly and deeply, so that her chest became tight and painful from the air. She exhaled, closed her eyes, squeezed tightly. Her husband had not cheated. He did what was far worse. He just killed everything that was between them. Walking over to the hallway closet, Elizabeth ripped its sash sideways and pulled her coat off the hanger. Smoky gray from a sale. She ran her fingers along the sleeve in light lint. It was the first thing Harvey had ever bought her. It seemed like an eternity since then, but in fact it had been just over a year since she had met him, since he had almost literally picked her up on the street, scared, lost, and so alone. Elizabeth put on her coat. She had recovered a bit since then, the clothes barely fitting together at her chest and waist. Now to put on her shoes, brown flat-toe boots, and these are the first shoes she bought on her first paycheck. As she remembers now, it was in the spring. She then worked at a cheese and sausage stand. Elizabeth reached for her purse. She stood on a pedestal in the hallway. Her cell phone was there. A simple push-button. Harvey had said she didn't need a smartphone, and she didn't mind. She even liked such a simple thing. Also in her purse were some papers, a handful of change. Elizabeth opened the door, crossed the threshold, and turned around. She saw the bedroom door, and for a moment in her head there was a completely crazy picture of the door swinging open. Her husband running out and shouting that he had nothing with the night butterfly, that he couldn't, because he only loved her, his wife. But this, of course, was only a silly fantasy. And then Elizabeth went out of the door. She didn't lock it, left her keys on the nightstand, because she wasn't going to come back here, and in general, she wasn't going to exist in Harvey's life anymore. I went downstairs. Her feet quickly counted down the steps, first, second, third, fourth, 24th, and so on. The counting helped her focus a little, and when Elizabeth, walking away down the street from the house, dialed the number she'd sworn she'd never call, her fingers were no longer trembling, and her voice sounded steady when the other side answered, when she said only 3 words. "Hi, pick me up." Harvey had admitted to himself 1,000 times he couldn't drink, but lately he'd been drinking more and more because his job wasn't going well. Loans were pressing, his wife had forgotten her place, his parents were nagging. Well, there were plenty of reasons to drink. Alcohol gave ease, a kind of dash oblivion. But then came the reckoning. And not just in the form of a headache. Harvey felt disgusting. And he remembered after the libations, that was as if alive stood before his eyes, his uncle Vadim, who died of white fever and had managed to do so much damage to his relatives that they preferred to forget everything about him, and even his grave was abandoned. Vadim nodded approvingly to his nephew, saying, "Keep up the good work, and soon you'll compare with me, or even surpass me." The sun was pouring through the slit in the curtains, and it seemed to stab him in the brain with a cutting pain. Harvey groaned, wrinkled his nose, and turned away. He ducked his nose into a shoulder tattooed crookedly, as if a butterfly had been crushed. The man opened his eyes and sat up. Then he pushed the girl to wake her up. "What do you want?" Rubbing her eyes, she yawned. "What are you doing here? You said to stay till morning. Do you want some in the morning?" With a carnivorous, professional smile, she reached for him, but Harvey flinched and fell to the floor with the blanket. "I don't want anything. Go away." As you say, the girl shrugged her shoulders like a man long accustomed to any mood swings and whims of clients. "You've paid me everything. Don't worry," she added, taking his fussing about picking up the scattered clothes on his own account, because he had taken the crumpled bills out of his pockets yesterday. But Harvey was just getting dressed. "Go away," he shouted. "I'm coming." The girl wrinkled her nose and dressed quickly. She sighed, because the client turned out to be generous, though he gave money yesterday without counting. But he was not going to treat her to a cup of coffee or breakfast. However, taking into account that somewhere in the apartment his wife was, it would be awkward to linger here, even with her shameless profession. So the girl looked out of the bedroom, careful where the wife was. She'd been in a lot of trouble, but she wasn't going to add to that collection by attacking a jealous woman. Although judging by the reaction of the client's wife last night, she was the kind of woman who put up with everything from her pants in the house. Harvey tumbled out of the bedroom as the front door slammed. The call girl he picked up off the highway left. "Elizabeth?" he called out. In addition to the bedroom, the apartment still had a hall where he now stood, another small room, and of course the kitchen and bathroom. Harvey walked around the apartment. He looked out on the balcony as if his wife might be lurking behind boxes, bags of junk he couldn't remember. Back in the kitchen, Harvey drank a cup of water. His throat was dry. Then he looked into the pot, and the borscht, which had not yet had time to sour, smelled deafeningly appetizing. "What a bastard I am," Harvey told himself, and drank more water. It was clear as day Elizabeth had taken offense and left. But where to? To his parents, of course. There seemed to be nowhere else for her to go. Harvey paused with the phone in his hands. Oh, how he was going to get it this time. Like never before. Because they'd had spats before, even fights, but never like this. Never like this. And it was really bad that he couldn't remember if it had happened with that girl. Like he passed out as soon as he entered the bedroom. Or was it? Because why else would she be in bed with him with no clothes on? Gritting his teeth in frustration, Harvey exhaled as if he were about to take a drink and dialed the number. After talking to his mother, Harvey sat down on a stool and thought hard. The wife wasn't there. His mother had no idea what had happened between them. She was talking about all sorts of silly things. About the fact that it was absolutely necessary to dig up the land at the cottage and bring dolomite flour because its acidity was wrong. About the fact that she had promised Elizabeth a recipe for peach pie, and please let her call, and she would dictate. Harvey's stomach rumbled as he skipped lunch yesterday and didn't eat dinner, but drank without snacking, and now his body was insistently making him realize what a wrong choice it had been. Only now Harvey could not eat. He began to call acquaintances, friends, and from whom he could hints and direct text asked. And if they do not have Elizabeth? Naturally, the acquaintances and friends quickly began to suspect something. At least Harvey was sure of it. "Did you have a fight?" Jacob asked. Jacob was his best friend, but he was the last person Harvey called, simply because he felt a desperate need to share his problem, and Elizabeth couldn't be at Jacob's house, because Jacob had moved to Spain years ago to live in Spain and then traveled around the world working in resorts. But that didn't stop them from being friends. "A little." "Have you been drinking?" Jacob said. "I told you didn't look like a human being when you were drunk," Jacob said. Harvey rolled his eyes. Ever since Jacob had stopped drinking at 18, after the first drink he'd had, He seemed to have made it his mission to bring everyone he could reach to a sober, sane lifestyle. "Did you call your parents?" "I did," Harvey sighed. "If she'd come to them, my mother would have had my ass." "When did she leave?" Jacob continued to ask her, as it seemed to Harvey, interrogate Jacob. "I don't know," Harvey mumbled. "We had a fight last night. I got up this morning and she was gone." "What are we gonna do with you?" Jacob was rustling things on the other side, and Harvey realized he was going to. He remembered that the other day Jacob had gone to work far away again and had found himself a damn job on some island in the Caribbean, and he was going to winter there and make some money. Harvey didn't envy him though. He wouldn't have the nerve, and his pride wouldn't allow him to serve some rich man, no matter how much he was paid. "If he doesn't show up," Jacob continued, "we'll have to file a missing persons report." "What's missing?" "She just got mad and ran away." "All sorts of things happen in the world," Jacob said seriously. "I'm sorry, of course, but you got such a wife." "You got the right one." Harvey grinned, still hungover and angry. "Don't get smart," Jacob snorted. "It doesn't matter what she had before you. The important thing is how you live your life. A wife like that. Anyway, you're a fool. I got things to do. You better go look for her and buy her, I don't know, flowers or something. Candy, or better yet, chocolate-covered fruit. Get on your knees and tell her you love her. Anyway, I get it." Harvey couldn't listen to this idiotic romantic advice any longer, because in his opinion, life was simpler and women should be able to talk to you in a straightforward and honest way, not like Jacob, who was still unmarried, suggested. When he finished talking, Harvey decided to stuff himself with some food just to keep his body working. He poured out the stale borscht, cursing himself. His wife was gone, and a whole pot of deliciousness was gone. That's two. In the refrigerator, there was a dried-up piece of cheese, and in the oven there were buns with spicy greens. Harvey chewed, sipping his tea, and thought, where had Elizabeth gone? How to find her, and the main question was how to fix what he had done and get his wife back. In his 28, Harvey lived in his own apartment. Parents, after he graduated from university, traded his 3-bedroom in the center of the city and gave his son a living space with the aim that when his wife appears and children will not have to get into the mortgage. By diploma, Harvey was supposed to become a high school English teacher, but it did not work out because it was his mother who wanted him to go to the teachers, and this desire was explained by the fact that she herself had once traded this work for the status of housewife. Only Harvey realized that to sit in classes and teach a bunch of kids modern he cannot. It's not his, and that's it. So, not without a huge scandal of course, he began to look for a place in life. He tried to work in a car repair shop and even did well, but then got bored as it was and went to the drivers. Now he was delivering goods around the city, but in the future he was looking forward to a long-haul trucker's business trips. Harvey liked that. No one stands over the soul, the road is winding, and there is no daily routine. In general, Harvey was in no hurry to start a serious relationship, to get married, but, as his mother would say, fate had its own way. Just one rainy, gray autumn day, driving to the store where they ordered goods, Harvey suddenly grabbed the vision. That's how it stuck. A fragile female figure. A blonde woman with long curls that were wet and made her look like a lost mongrel was sitting on a bench, her face hidden in her palms. "Are you all right, girl?" Harvey asked, coming up to her. She flinched and looked up. The eyes were huge green, and though Harvey had never been prone to poetic nonsense in his life, he compared them to deer eyes. They were brown though, actually. "I don't know," replied the stranger, who looked to be about 23 or 25. "No more." "Thank you," she added, and smiled shyly. Her voice was beautiful, like her whole self. She had an accent, but Harvey didn't pay attention to that. "Thank you for what?" "You're the first person to ask me that." "Well, so." Harvey was confused and looked around. It didn't look like the girl was expecting anyone. "You're not all right," he said, and then held out his hand to her. "You'll catch cold in here. Let's have some coffee, shall we?" She agreed, and he took her to the nearest cafe, or rather, it was a lentil shop, but the stranger enjoyed it all. She moaned with pleasure as she sank her teeth into the first hot burger. The meat juice ran down her chin and Harvey handed her a napkin. "I've never had one of these before." "Yeah." He was a little surprised. So what's wrong with you? Nothing, she shrugged. That's all. I decided to start all over again. Came to this town and she stopped talking, returning her attention to the chowders. Harvey nodded understandingly. It's life, all right. People today are always running away from something, looking for something. Earlier in Harvey's life, everything was very simple. He made relationships with women simple. He got acquainted easily, then broke up because he didn't need anything serious. But here, it was like being caught in a hurricane. Harvey realized that he was, no, not in love. It would be too simple a word to describe his feelings for this amazing young woman. That feeling was like a need, even like an addiction. He realized that he felt differently around Elizabeth. It was easy to laugh and be silent with her. She could talk, it seemed, about anything in the world. She was not a talker who pours herself about herself. She was more interested in listening to what others had to say. But naturally, questions arose about who she was, where she came from. Elizabeth opened up about that. It turned out that she grew up in a family of immigrants who left for England back in the early 90s. Her parents died when Elizabeth was only 14 and she, by the decision of her guardians, had to spend the years until adulthood in a private boarding house in Switzerland. You mean the Institute for Noble Maidens? Harvey grinned when she told him about it. A terrible place, Elizabeth corrected him and looked at him in such a way that he stopped laughing at once. One is always alone there, and one is always washed over. It turned out that as soon as she turned 17, her brother came for her. He was 4 years older and somehow he managed to get enough power to be able to take her sister away. But after a few more years, Elizabeth realized that she and her brother were different people and decided to return to where her parents had once lived. Harvey listened and wondered what it was like to leave everything behind and come and start over in an environment he had never lived in before. He did not ask what Elizabeth was doing abroad. He had enough of her few phrases about her brother trying to find his place in life, trying to do business, but it did not work out, and now she was at a loss. Elizabeth admitted that she and her brother had quarreled and parted. They became complete strangers. Soon after their acquaintance, it turned out that Elizabeth had money with a sparrow's nose. She rented an apartment and thought she had to get a job, but she had no experience, which would have come in handy because there, being abroad, as Harvey realized, Elizabeth worked as a tourist guide. There is little or no tourism in our town. Harvey shared his knowledge of local life with the girl. There are tourists, but to the nature, there are mountains nearby, forests. It is, not beaches with museums to show. It is, training is needed. And we have only one travel agency. No two. Why don't you try there? But it turned out that Elizabeth had already been there and was told there were no vacancies. She was running out of money to pay her rent for the next month. And then Harvey, realizing that meetings and conversations were not enough for him, proposed. "Marry me," he said it simply, without any of that gallant courtesy. "I will take care of you." Elizabeth froze and looked at him confused, a little frightened. Harvey's heart jumped. Well, purely deer she, as if a truck with lights on rushes, and the deer does not know what to do then. Then she nodded and said yes. Harvey's parents, by the way, the news that their son decided to settle down, took it negatively at first, because they thought it was strange girl came from nowhere, almost that, and so you can say, it is not clear what kind of person she is. And here is a big deal, marriage. However, time passed, and Harvey's mother, his father, and other relatives changed their minds. Everyone was enchanted with Elizabeth. She turned out to be a girl kind, easy, tactful, intelligent. In general, the family council decided such a bride in the family needed. "What does it matter what happened to a person before?" sighed Kolia's mother. "It happens that people meet their destiny. Get married, my son, and take care of your wife. She's the only one like that." But the closer the wedding got, the more anxious Harvey became. And it was not that his relationship with Elizabeth somehow spoiled. No, with this just everything was fine. She, as they say, looked at his mouth and was happy with the role of future wife. It was just that Harvey suddenly realized that he was not just in love. It was exactly like an addiction. He felt that Elizabeth was able to influence him. And it all began with the fact that she, when one day they were at the market and he argued with a saleswoman who seemed to be trying to cheat with fish, began to grab Harvey by the sleeve and say that there was no need, please, conflicts, because everything can be solved with kindness. Excuse me, appealed Harvey then to the saleswoman. I'm sorry, please. I overreacted. My bad. And when they returned home, Harvey felt, here, as if his mother scolded him as a child and made him apologize to adults. Harvey began to feel angry that Elizabeth was trying to control him. He could think of no other name for her actions when she, for example, began to tell him that he should not go to this friend's house in the evening because they were drinking and he would drink, and that was bad for him. It was Harvey's own idea for his wife to stay home and do the housework. That was his position. He is a provider, and she creates coziness, cooks, cleans. I need a wife, not an educator. He threw it to Elizabeth the first time they fought. Then he apologized, of course. And then everything started to annoy him again. And in the way Elizaveta instructs him, and in general, how she evenly arranges the cans and boxes of food in the locker, how she hangs the towels in the bathroom neatly, like a ruler. And as if I didn't have enough to be nervous about, suddenly my wife got sick. Problems began as Harvey's mother, who was traveling with Elizabeth to clinics, shamefully explained. On the women's side, Elizabeth began to lie down more and more often, complaining of a sore stomach. And then on one far from beautiful day in the evening, when Harvey was hoping for a very pleasant night, she said that the doctor, you see, forbade to perform conjugal duty for the time being. Then Elizabeth seemed to get better, and then she was sick again. Now Harvey was simply living in a mode of poorly concealed irritation, and now it appeared as if he were not married. Because instead of understanding, they tried to teach him, instead of intimacy, a kiss on the cheek. But the last straw was that his father and mother suddenly ran out of money and needed them urgently because the parents accidentally flooded the apartment of the neighbors below. Now, of course, needed money for repairs to forget the whole story, and nerves did not wreck. Then Harvey approached Elizabeth and asked, and maybe we call your brother, maybe borrow from him on kinship can be. Elizabeth suddenly started crying. She began to say that she had asked Harvey that she wanted to forgive her past. He said that in fact, she was reacting abnormally. He had just asked. He was sick of it all. He was sick of her and his mother trying to tell him how to live his life, like trying to put him on a diet because his blood sugar was too high. Tired that his own wife refuses intimacy, and often not because she is sick, like treated and healthy, but because, you see, no mood. Harvey threatened that he would not tolerate such treatment. The next day, Elizabeth pushed the sugar bowl away from him at breakfast, saying it was not good for coffee. So he got up and left the house without breakfast. And after work, he got drunk. And then he saw this girl in a short skirt on the highway, and he snapped. I decided that I had to teach my wife a lesson, so that she, smart as she is, would know her place. And now, in the morning, came the reckoning. After taking a pill for a headache, Harvey decided to take a nap and then, with a fresh head, so to speak, to think about what to do next. When he woke up, the hands were already past 7 in the evening, and the phone had a dozen missed calls. The pills seemed to help, but when Harvey dialed his mother when she tried to call, there was a reason for the migraine to return. What the hell are you doing? Where's Elizabeth? It turned out that family friends had managed to report to her that Harvey was suspiciously asking about his spouse. So he had to tell the truth. Well, part of it was that they'd had a fight, and the next morning Elizabeth was gone. You should give you a good belt, gloomily said his father, who took the phone from his mother for a while. Another man would have carried such a wife in his arms, but you. I guess we won't see grandchildren. Harvey wanted to bang his head against the wall. What a mess. And as if an annoying voice in his head was saying, have you thought, male dog, that from fun with night butterflies there are diseases? Maybe you've already contracted something nasty. Harvey doomadly surfed the internet for phone numbers of hospitals and horrible morgues. Harvey clutched the phone in his sweaty hands. Hesitating to start calling too vividly, he imagined how he could suddenly be told that yes, there was a woman matching your description. She was in serious condition, or dead. Harvey really didn't like to feel guilty, but right now, this feeling swamping him with guilt seemed so right. Yes, it was his fault. Yes, he's an idiot. Cheating on his wife, in the marital bed, and in front of her. Humiliated her. Destroyed what was there. He went to the kitchen and drank a glass of ice water. It's time. Time to call in. But then the phone played a cheerful tune, announcing a voice message. Harvey jerked, turned it on. Elizabeth, her native voice. Except that's what she was saying. Don't look for it. Parting ways, he'd heard her. She's gone. She's not coming back. Harvey listened to the message a great many times. Everything became clear to him. His marriage was over. Lately, Harvey went to work through force. Everything was annoying. He thought about quitting and looking for something in some other place. The day after the betrayal fell on a day off, and it passed, as if bobbed deeper and deeper in the swamp. Floundering and get out did not work. And when the new day, Harvey did not go, rushed to work because he knew it would forget about all this, will pull into the familiar routine, and at least for a while, but will be not so cloudy, not so sick at heart. However, of course, it was only a temporary respite. Harvey explained himself to his parents, his mom, dad, and then his cousin and some others. Anyway, he wasn't the only one listening to the message from Elizabeth. His mother was crying, his father was cursing, his relatives were shaking their heads and looking reproachful. Harvey felt strange. He wanted to rush between all these people and ask for advice on what to do, how to get his wife back. Or he wanted to take some of them by the scruff of the neck, shake them hard, and demand an answer to why they thought they had the right to teach him. Or do they live perfect lives themselves, without any mistakes, and have nothing to be ashamed of? Naturally, he tried to call Elizabeth, text and voice messages. But on the other side, there were only long beeps. Daughter, my heart is breaking. Harvey's mom appealed to her daughter-in-law's kindness. Honey, at least talk to me. How are you? Where are you? What's wrong with you? Harvey, I know he's a stranger to you now, but you're like our own. And one day, Elizabeth answered. Harvey found out when his mother called him and started yelling into the phone. And it wasn't happy news. It turned out that yes, Elizabeth misses her too, her mother-in-law. She is grateful to be welcomed as her own. But no, she can't go back. As she asked me to tell you, it's too late. And she also asked to convey that she is grateful to Harvey for giving her days of happiness and love once upon a time. She also wanted me to tell you that she would try to get a divorce soon. You have a heart of stone. His mother told him, sobbing, and Harvey took the receiver away from his ear, wincing. His wife loved him. She was faithful, kind. You'll never have another like her. Harvey didn't immediately realize why they were looking at him like that. He was standing in line at the cash register of a gas station convenience store, and he didn't realize that he was listening to all this by accidentally turning on the speaker on his smartphone, which means that everyone around him heard everything perfectly well. Flushed with shame, Harvey threw some bills on the counter and muttered that he didn't need change, grabbed his coffee and sandwich, and ran out into the street. How sick he felt. Meanwhile, time was passing, time was flying. October was coming to an end and autumn was taking over the city more and more, ripping off the furiously variegated leaves, exposing the sharp branches, pouring icy rains, and as if sucking the colors out of the surrounding reality. How are you? Harvey Jacob called one day. How do you think? Harvey grinned grimly. He was standing at the stove, pouring the contents of a jar labeled canned borscht. Dine at home. Okay, I get it, Jacob coughed. Let's not pour salt on the wound, as they say. Are you working? Harvey asked indifferently, stirring what was spilling into the pot. The cabbage was suspiciously faded and seemed rubbery. I'm working, replied his friend with genuine cheerfulness. It's so beautiful here. The palm trees, the sea, and the crowd. Jacob rolled his eyes, but he couldn't understand his friend, with whom he'd shared a sandbox. What kind of joy is it to hop around with a tray between rich people who, from their millions, which, by the way, may have been obtained dishonestly, give you crumbs like a sparrow crumbles a bun in the park? The girls, I'll tell you, top class. They're all models, Jacob went on. Yeah, Harvey said, and remembering that he needed to salt the brew, he reached for the salt shaker. The plastic lid of the salt shaker suddenly snapped off, and the contents spilled thickly into the pot. Harvey was ready to cry out. Everything was falling out of his hands. He couldn't cook, could he? He grinned mirthfully. My mom used to cook before, and then after he moved out, he'd eat half-finished meals and go to her place for lunches, because my parents lived across the street. Then Elizabeth cooked. Variety, delicious, And now I'm on my own. I could have dropped in on my mother, but I didn't have the strength to listen to her heavy sighs about her ruined marriage. We're having a picnic on the yacht tonight, Jacob said. I'm off. I got work to do. Harvey put the phone away, fished out the salt shaker lid. He waited for the time indicated on the label. The borscht was edible, though oversalted, but it was nothing like the borscht Elizabeth had made. Men don't cry, Harvey told himself, and sliced the bread thickly and sat down to eat. Although the thermometer showed 32 degrees of heat and the time was just approaching noon, Jacob did not feel fatigued, but was full of fresh energy. Yes, he was fortunate enough to genuinely love his work, and he saw no reason to be ashamed of it. His mother, by the way, did not approve of the fact that her son, who had a higher education, and even a law degree by the way, was working as a waiter, but Jacob was fine with it. "Your cocktail, sir," he said in decent English to the man in the white suit. He nodded absent-mindedly and took a glass filled with tropical fruit juices mixed with coffee and crushed ice. The yacht froze on the mirror-like surface of the Caribbean Sea, reflecting the cloudless sky. There was a flock of dolphins tumbling about. People on the yacht were deciding serious business matters, and big numbers were being talked about. Jacob caught the words £6 million sterling, but he didn't care, or rather, he didn't seem to be listening. And even less did he show that he knew some of the people he served drinks and appetizers to very well. He was used to behaving at certain times like a man for whom the beautiful life is close by, just like those dolphins over there, but you only touch it lightly and make sure to hold on to the place allotted to you by fate. "Miss," Jacob smiled, handing the glass of chia seed smoothie to the girl. She's new here, Jacob thought, noticing the uneven tan of her slender body, the charms of which were clearly visible under the light lace sundress. Her face was hidden by the large sunglasses in the shadow of her wide-brimmed hat. Jacob turned around for a moment as he walked away with the tray. How interesting this time. Jacob whistled a cheerful tune under his breath and hurried to the kitchen to prepare the freshest oysters, delivered by private plane from New England, especially for the lunch of the people on the yacht. Time went on and on. Harvey at first waited with horror for the moment when he would have to sign the divorce papers. For some reason, it seemed to him that before their separation would receive, so to speak, official confirmation, there was still a chance to fix something. But the documents did not come. And in time, he managed to relax, even stop thinking about it 10 times a day. Especially that twisted family affairs now at his parents in the apartment broke plastic windows and had to help his father, who in this case a little bit smart, but needed help, because his mother flatly refused to call professional workers, arguing that there is no reason to spend money when the family as many as 2 not armless men are. But these windows were still flowers compared to the task that his mother set for Harvey one day. "Natalie is counting on you to help her," Mom said, slamming her palm down on the table. Harvey rolled his eyes. What a story. His cousin had just gotten divorced. Divorced, by the way, because of her husband's many strings. Husband, who was unlucky enough to work in the firm, the boss of which was a model family man and from his subordinates expected a decent way of life, hurried as any to whitewash himself, and that the former did not carry the revelations of his love affairs and people, threw to her feet generous payoff, and even ahead for 6 months paid alimony at the couple was a 4-year-old son named Demian. And so the sister decided that the divorce she wants to celebrate a trip to the sea. The child left on native babysitters was enough, and herself was going to divorce. "Mom, and why me?" stretched Harvey, who sincerely did not understand where he was pulled. Mom sighed and began to chew on it. Turned out that Natalie alone is afraid to go abroad, afraid that it is not safe for a young and pretty woman. Harvey held back a chuckle. It always seemed to him that it is almost every member of the male sex is not safe next to his sister is. She's a hurricane and a little harpy if not in spirit. Then his mother added that Harvey himself, by the way, was beginning a legal vacation, and there was nothing to sulk at home. He, too, needed to unwind. And besides, it turned out that Natalie originally wanted to fly with her girlfriend, but she could not due to family reasons, and the travel agency does not want to return the money and to argue with them for a long time, and it turns out that not to waste the good. Departure was scheduled in a week. Rest was planned on one of the islands in the Caribbean Sea, in a hotel with 4 stars and all-inclusive program. "Go, son," Harvey winked at his father. "If your mother would let me go, I'd love to. Go, take a vacation." His father winked at him. "It's a young man's business." "Shut up, you lesher." My wife jokingly swung at my father. "Anyway, Harvey, pack your things. You already have a passport, by the way. We didn't have time to go to the sea with Elizabeth." Her mother added quietly. And that's how something turned over in Harvey. He realized that just cannot stand this his vacation next to his relatives to spend, to listen constantly about what he is a worthless ex-husband. What a wife missed. "Okay," said Harvey, rising from the plush chair decorating the living room parents. "Okay, I'm going." By the time the plane took off, Harvey had already regretted his decision and even understood his sister's ex-husband a little. Because Natalie, oh that Natalie, she hadn't changed a bit since kindergarten. She was just as cranky, talkative, stubborn. They once drove halfway home from the airport because she thought she'd forgotten something, but then the allegedly forgotten thing was found in her purse. She'd made Harvey help dig through her suitcase, opening its gut in the middle of the hall because she'd forgotten to put something in her carry-on. On the plane, he'd been afraid they'd be disembarked, so fiercely Natalie had argued with a neighboring passenger for him to let her in the window seat. All the time that Natalie did not bother him with conversations, Harvey dozed off. And then, leaving the plane and the airport hall, blinked for a long time at the sun, which seemed unrealistically large and bright, scorching so hot. Finally, they checked into the hotel, where they were assigned adjoining rooms. Natalie began to complain that she was tired from the road, she needed to rest, and since Harvey knew her well enough to realize that she would rest, but would not sleep, and would come to him as an interlocutor and complain about her fate, he decided it was better to leave his room, to walk, to freshen up, and then maybe later, Natalie would be loaded with the impressions of the tropical resort, and she wouldn't have time for him. Harvey put on a shirt of a stupid mottled color in palm trees his mother had bought and given him before the flight. It looked strange, but perhaps it was just right for this place. Having changed his clothes, the man ran out of the room, leaving his sisters grumbling behind the door. On the street, he hurriedly bought a bottle of water, and it was hot. On the territory of the hotel, music rumbled, children squeaked, and voices of animators sounded. This place was well known as a resort for family vacations. Wrinkling his nose, Harvey decided to take a walk nearby. He reached the embankment, stopped, and covered his eyes with the visor of his palm and looked at the sea. It's beautiful. In his childhood, he had only been on it. In his heart, there was something like joy, a free vacation. And why not be happy? Yes, the family fell apart, but it's not an eternity to carry the weight. Having bought a whole coconut, inside of which was splashing tasty water, Harvey wandered along the embankment. On one side of the beach, people were sunbathing. Girls in swimsuits were pleasing to the eye. On the other side, there were shops and tents selling all sorts of things. Harvey stopped at one of them to take a hat, so as not to catch a sunstroke. "Excuse me." As he stepped back, he accidentally bumped some tourists with his shoulder. He didn't answer, but he didn't protest. Harvey wandered lazily onward, and the one he ran into looked after him for a while, and the expression of his face suddenly changed from astonished to joyful, and some kind of cunning, as if this man had planned something insidious and triumphed in advance. In the evening, the brother and sister went to dinner at a local restaurant, which was famous for seafood dishes. Harvey found that he had regained his appetite. After dinner, they decided to walk along the promenade, where there was a lot of excitement, where artists in traditional costumes were performing, music was playing, and under the rhythmic beat of drums, small fireworks were flying up to the sky, and tall torches with garlands of flowers were lighting up everything with warm light. "I want to dance." Natalie threw herself into the midst of the festivities, twirled and laughed. He thought of standing aside, just to watch. But then he was surrounded by girls. Each of the dancers looked like a graceful statue carved out of ebony, each smiling with white teeth like pearls and swaying her hips hypnotizingly. "Is that for me?" Harvey was surprised when he was handed a cocktail on a tray decorated with umbrellas. Thank you," he said, and looked around. Everyone seemed to be getting a drink now, and many of the tourists were holding drinks in their hands. Harvey shrugged, a hospitable feast for vacationers. Why refuse? Maybe it would be easier on the soul. It did become easier after the cocktail, but not on the soul, but in the head and even in front of the eyes swam. Harvey grabbed the nearest palm tree. The girls swayed synchronously. The horizon line began to fall somewhere. He wanted to say that he was not feeling well. He should go to the room and rest, that he probably had a headache from the sun. But then with frightening clarity, the guess pierced his brain that something was mixed into the cocktail. But who? What was spiked? Why? And what would happen to him? Thinking all this over, Harvey could not utter a word, and his eyesight was failing him. But he felt someone strong putting his shoulder and dragging him, muttering in English, seemingly explaining something to those around him. Harvey long ago knew English very well, then managed to forget for lack of necessity, but now suddenly remembered and understood. The one who was dragging him jokingly informed the others that his friend had too much alcohol, and that was the state he was in. Harvey, slipping consciousness, concluded that he knew no one in this country. No, yes, he did. There is one person, and that's Jacob. Except that the voice of the man dragging him didn't sound like Jacob's. And then Harvey fell into darkness. His body ached like a cold, his head buzzed as if a swarm of bees had settled between his ears. He was also dizzy. Slowly, though, Harvey realized that the floor and everything beneath it was shaking, and he could hear the waves. Right above him were voices, now in English, male and female voices. They were arguing. She demanded to explain why he had brought him. He grinned and said that he would tell everything, but only let the future partner come to the senses first. Harvey was very curious about what was going on. It was also disturbing. Finally, he opened his eyes. He realized that he was lying on a wide and low sofa at the stern of a boat, a ship, or rather, judging from what he could see around him, it was a yacht. The sun was rising over the horizon and was blinding, preventing a clear view of the people leaning over him. But the man with the voice, familiar from the moment of the kidnapping, Harvey did not like such a wimpy type, a kind of Mr. Tough guy from action movie. And the woman, Harvey squinted and thought that he must still be lying awake and dreaming, because that was impossible. Elizabeth? He asked, shocked, recognizing his ex-wife. Elizabeth stood with her arms folded across her chest and her head bowed. It was her, and at the same time it seemed like a stranger in front of him. The girl had visibly lost weight. Her collarbones, knees, and the points of her elbows protruded, but seemed only to emphasize more the gracefulness of her feminine figure. She had cut her hair short and changed the color. Instead of straw blonde, it was now brown with a Cleopatra-style bow. The breeze fluttered the skirt of a black strappy sundress. Wide bands of gold bracelets glittered on her tan wrists. Harvey could have sworn on anything that his wife had never looked more beautiful, and he'd never wanted to touch her so badly, without any erotic overtones, just to make sure she was real. Why did you bring him here? The marvelous vision in the form of his ex-wife snarled, addressing the unpleasant type. What the hell are you doing? Relax, the man grinned and opened the door, which had not been visible before, and took out a bottle with transparent contents from the refrigerator. Don't frown, or you'll get wrinkles here. He pointed with his finger. You'll get wrinkles? But I understand. He raised his hands conciliatorily. You're surprised. I was surprised when I saw him too. What an amusing coincidence, I thought. Having said all this, he slammed the bottle against the side of the yacht, knocking off the cap, and held it out to Harvey. Just water. Take a sip. The type grinned. You don't look so good. I didn't call him, blurted out Elizabeth. Now she looked not only indignant and surprised, but also frightened. I don't know what he's doing here, I swear it. Yes, I believe you, shrugged the unpleasant type. Elizabeth, whispered Harvey, holding the bottle in his hand. He just couldn't believe this meeting. He had so much to say to her. He was so absorbed in his impressions that for a few minutes he even put aside the burning question of why he was here and who had kidnapped him. Sighing, Harvey sipped cautiously. Truly, it was water, and he greedily clung to the bottle. So, what do we have? The obscure man sat down on the sofa, spreading his arms out on the board on either side of him. And we just didn't know where to get the right man, but fate had its way. What? No, you're not. That's impossible. We'll bring him back to shore immediately. Elizabeth held out her hand, pointing her finger at Harvey. Don't you dare bring him into this. Why? The man smirked and arched an eyebrow questioningly. From what you've told me about him, he's a good fit for us, and the fact that your ex is just going to make it easier. I hate him. Elizabeth gritted her teeth. You've ruined my whole life. I gave you the golden ticket, baby. You're the one who managed to tear it up and throw it away. But like I said, fortune is on our side. You can make it up to me. Rising, he cast an unreadable glance at the kidnapped man, then lightly, affectionately slapped his palm on Elizabeth's cheek and headed for the interior of the yacht. I'll tell the captain to make another lap around the bay. Meanwhile, you Chad and you. Explain to him what's going on and make it clear that he has no choice. Unless he wants to join our little party, well, you explain to him what you're risking in that case. The last words were strikingly different in intonation from everything that had been said before. They read the coldness and determination of a man who is used to doing things the way he thinks they should be done, and also the readiness to make sure that the people around him, if it so happens to help in this, as well as do not dare to interfere. Hello, Elizabeth said and smiled sadly, sat down next to me. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Harvey opened his mouth and closed it. Where to begin? With the confession of what an asshole he was that night and vows that he only needs her, that without her life is a cardboard gray scenery in which he feels like a broken wind-up toy, or the fact that he doesn't know what's going on, what they want him to do, and that he's got a cousin on the beach and must be panicking about losing him. That's my brother, Elizabeth said. I'm sorry. I didn't know. How did you end up here in the first place? Harvey replied that he was brought to the islands, and then she nodded and continued, except that what she was saying didn't seem to clarify anything, because Elizabeth was suddenly rambling on about how Harvey should just pretend that he agreed with everything. He didn't need to ask any questions, and then, as soon as the yacht was moored in the harbor, he should rush to the hotel, pick up his sister, and fly home. What about you? Harvey asked the most important question of all. What the hell is going on here? What are you risking if I don't agree to something? You're an idiot, Elizabeth said and rubbed her temples, squeezing her eyes shut. My head hurts. The pills don't help. Then, pulling herself together, she opened her eyes. Why don't you just get out of here, huh? You seemed fine with us breaking up. I was wrong. Oh, she exclaimed. Do you realize that sounds like a cheap melodrama? Only it's all over between us. I'm sorry that you got into trouble, but you can and you should get out. I'll take care of it myself. Harvey jumped up and caught his wife by the shoulders, turning her around. I haven't gotten the divorce papers yet, so you're still my wife and I want to know what's going on. Oh, I see the tough guy is already in uniform. Elizabeth's brother is back on deck. We didn't get a chance to introduce ourselves to each other. Alex, but for friends it's Mort Alex. So, you didn't tell him anything? Well, my sister's a fool, he added with feigned pity. She's my wife. Harvey tried to put as much power into his voice as possible, and I'm not going to let. I know what you've done. Believe me, she wouldn't have left you if you were all white and fluffy, but you think there's still chemistry between you? I'm not so sure about that. You know, she could have lived like a queen, been a socialite, but she gave it all up for that. What did you say back then? Independence. Do you know how many times I asked her to come back? But she chose to be a hackneyed housewife. So much potential buried. So what happened? Alex waved his hands. She's back where she belongs. And the fact that you suddenly appeared, well, let's just say it's a funny life accident. But you hurt my sister, Alex gloomed. It seems to me that you didn't always treat her well either, Harvey answered. Maybe. Alex bowed his head thoughtfully. Only I have the right to do that. I took care of her, took her out of the orphanage of crazy saints and gave her everything, taught her everything. And what have you done for her? Put her in the kitchen making borscht? Please stop it, Elizabeth shouted. Stop it, both of you. Okay, really. Alex took a deep breath in and exhaled. Let's calm down and talk seriously. What's going on here? Harvey asked. $1 million deal. Alex grinned. The sun, which came out of the horizon, was beginning to blaze. Dolphins were tumbling in their games again not far from the yacht. The shoreline was decorated with lush greenery and snow-white walls of the city buildings, mostly with tiled roofs. But Harvey didn't notice all this beauty. He listened, and the further he listened, the more it seemed to him that now he was being told the script of some Hollywood thriller, but not the events of real life, but it seemed to be real life, and that made him feel bad. It turned out that Elizabeth's brother had been in bad company since his youth. However, he didn't call them bad, but according to the story they were, because these guys were running illegal sports car races, but that was their first and, so to speak, their main activity. And also it sometimes stole things from rich people for other rich people. That is, they performed exclusive orders of a specific nature while traveling around the world. The clients were mostly from South America and the Middle East, as well as Southeast Asia. Harvey swallowed nervously. Now it was clear why Elizabeth was running away from her old life. His brother did not hide that he was preparing a special place for his little sister because she could be useful to such a team, including through feminine charm, the art of seduction. But it so happened that Elizabeth had no other family and friends except Alex. In general, Harvey was not strong in understanding psychology, but here he understood it seems to be an addiction, the desire to return to the only close person. Naturally, Elizabeth all these years knew what Alex does, but he was her own brother. That's why she kept quiet. And when Harvey betrayed her love so cruelly, Elizabeth, of course, turned to her brother, and he welcomed her lost little sister with open arms. Except he was expecting a show of gratitude in return, and it seems now Elizabeth had some business to attend to. It was unclear to Harvey at first, but why wouldn't she just say no to her brother? After all, he wouldn't harm his own sister, but then he realized he would. Alex had said that if Elizabeth refused, then, unfortunately, a very powerful man would know that she was involved in the disappearance of the diamond necklace from his safe. What nonsense! Harvey exclaimed. She's not a thief. I know that, sighed Alex. You know it. But the owner of the diamonds is sure that such a person as my sister, who suddenly came back to me, can't have nothing to do with it. You see, she lived with you for, what is it, a year? So insignificant compared to the amount of time she spent with me. Do you think he'll believe she was here by accident after her husband cheated? Ridiculous. Look at her. Alex suddenly grabbed Elizabeth by the waist, pulled her to him, and with the other hand grabbed her chin and forced her to lift her head. What kind of an idiot would believe that such a beautiful woman could be cheated on? No man could resist her. So, the poor girl has no excuse why she's here, except that she's involved in the necklace theft. What kind of brother are you if you're willing to frame your own sister? Harvey began. I didn't create that rumor. Alex smirked. But why should I if Elizabeth turns out to be ungrateful and refuses to help disprove it? After all, she was the one who set me up when she ran away. She called me from Germany and cried, begging me to apologize and let me go. You wanted me to sleep with that bastard from Colombia. I didn't mean anything to you even then. Elizabeth pushed her brother away. It seemed like a small thing, but now she was closer to Harvey than to him, and she could have moved to the other side of the boat. And yet, you called me when you realized you were alone. The three of them were silent for a while. A few seagulls circled above the yacht, squawking longingly, and then Alex continued. It turned out that the priceless necklace belonging to Mr. John Smith was stolen by some business partner, James Richter, who had long ago offended him. The reason for the long ago offense, as Alex explained, had nothing to do with everything that was going on now. The owner of the jewelry treasure, naturally, began to dig in search of the villains who had executed such an order for Richter, because he could not have acted on his own. Mr. Smith believed that dealing with the customer of the theft was one thing, and he would deal with it later and carefully. But finding the one who stole the diamonds and punishing them according to the richness of his own imagination was quite another. I don't know why he thought that it was me and my guys who stole the necklace, shrugged Alex. It seems that someone is taking such an elaborate revenge on us, maybe competitors. And here, you know, what a sadness. There's almost nothing left of the former team. In this business, you know, people like to retire early while they're still alive. I tried to tell Smith, of course, that we had nothing to do with it, and he said there's a chance to make it right, prove your innocence, and redeem ourselves if it was us. All we had to do was return the necklace to its rightful owner. What's that got to do with me? Harvey asked. He asked the question, but only had a nasty feeling that the answer already knew. You're going to help us do it? Aya. See, Alex nodded. Like I said, the team has thinned out. Right now it's just me and her, and one other guy. Anuba, but promising. We need one more person. But why me? Actually, I was thinking of picking someone from the locals. There are guys who are good at special cases, if you know what I mean, smirked Alex. Harvey understood him perfectly well. He was talking about some bandits. But you see, that's the problem. It's a risky business. There's more than $1 million at stake. There's a risk that the new guy on the team decides he can take the whole pie, you know. And then I saw you. Can you believe what a great coincidence that is? And I thought, hey, why not this guy? Elizabeth told me a lot about you. You have all the skills I need. What skills? Harvey mumbled in shock. I didn't even steal apples from my neighbors when I was a kid in the village. You're a good driver and you know English pretty well. That's enough for us. But most importantly, you'll be faithful. You won't betray. You won't let anything bad happen to her, will you? With these words, Alex ran his fingers along Elizabeth's cheek. She shook her head and tapped him on the arm, but he only grinned. After listening to the brother of his yet-present spouse, Harvey hesitated, not only because he needed to digest what he'd been told, he was also persistently, as if a mosquito squeaking above his ear, began to be tormented by one question: why Alex was so frank with him. Wasn't he afraid that Harvey might spit on everything as soon as he was on the shore and go to the police to report about the kidnapping and at the same time about the criminal case? Actually, there were not many options why Alex was so brave. First, he really believed that Harvey loved Elizabeth so much that he would do anything for her. But that one was kind of suspicious, because what kind of love, after a daring outright treason? Another option was that Harvey was considered a wimp, which if not involved in the case, then run home, cowardly tuck tail, and no one will say anything. The third option seemed the most realistic and gloomy, because perhaps Alex thought that if Harvey didn't agree, he could just get rid of him. Who knows, maybe he even had experience in the past in eliminating uncooperative partners. Harvey realized that the smart thing to do now was to stall for time. He should go back to the shore, talk to his sister. No, not to ask her for advice, but just to calm her down so she wouldn't make any unnecessary noise. Then we need to call home. Parents, ask my dad for advice. Jacob too. Harvey cheered up, remembering that he had a friend who worked on these islands. Jacob could tell him where to complain and where to save himself. The silence dragged on. Then Harvey stepped toward Alex and shook his hand. I'm in. What do you want me to do? That's great. I see you're a smart guy. Don't worry, I'll brief you. And by the way, if everything goes the way it should, Alex smiled, we're all going to be very rich. Not only will John not feed us to the sharks, but he'll reward us royally. Is that all? Asked Harvey when after about an hour, during which Alex had been outlining his crazy plan, the boat docked and he got off. I can just go. What did you expect? The criminal adventurer arched an eyebrow. That I'd put a tracker on you like a dog so you wouldn't get lost. Understood, Harvey nodded, fighting the temptation to punch someone in the jaw. You just have to show up tonight. At this address, he handed over a note with the time on it. Understood, Harvey nodded again and looked at Elizabeth. She didn't come down from the yacht. She sat on the couch with her legs tucked under her and stared out at the horizon. Harvey walked along the dock, stepped on the quay. Now the main thing is not to fool around, and the first thing he did was to go to the hotel, hoping that his sister had not yet raised all the local police and search dogs with helicopters to look for him. Yeah, he's here. Natalie was standing with her arms at her sides in the hotel lobby, and as soon as Harvey stepped into the lobby, she swooped down and pounded him in the shoulder with her fist. You've had your fill, haven't you? I was. Harvey was trying to figure out what to say. Oh, why did I have to go with you? I felt so bad. And you? I know you men. Harvey closed his mouth, but he changed his mind about the ornate lie and instead grinned wryly. I met a hottie. Talked, drank. Well, spent the night at her place. So what? You think I want to sit around with you all the time? No, I'm a free man now, and since I'm on vacation, I'll have a blast. Having said that, he strode off at a leisurely pace towards the stairs to his room. There is an excursion to the local Museum of Folk Crafts. It will be in half an hour. Why don't we go? Okay, Natalie answered in a calm tone, and then to the cafe. I read on the internet that they have mango pancakes. Harvey decided that in order to make his plans work, he had better act like, could he act? He, a little bit the same. And then everything would be all right. The main thing in all this fuss is not to involve his sister in any way. After a quick shower and a change of clothes, Harvey dialed Jacob's number. Come on, answer it. He paced nervously around the room and almost jumped when Jacob answered. That was great, Jacob said, pleased when he learned that Harvey had happened to be in the same place where he worked. Sure, we'll see each other. When the shift is over. Wait, let's do it at 7 o'clock. There's a cafe near the Mermaid Fountain. The crabs there are delicious. Having finished the conversation, Harvey breathed a sigh of relief. Alex had told him to come at 9 o'clock at night to some alleyway where he didn't know where anything was. He'd be able to talk to Jacob 2 hours before that. That would give him time to figure out how to get out of it. When they met, they hugged each other tightly. Jacob, as always, was asking questions, giving them news. They ordered non-alcoholic beer and crabs. Harvey thought he wouldn't be able to swallow a bite, and he'd hardly eaten lunch, but to his own surprise, the juicy, white meat under the crab shells disappeared just like that. He told Jacob everything as it happened. He knew Jacob could be trusted. Jacob seemed to be a sensible guy. Harvey was glad on the one hand that things had worked out the way he wanted them to, but on the other hand, he was sorry that Harvey had left the country, because when your best friend lives nearby, it's easier. Jacob listened carefully. He was serious. You're in trouble, he said. Can you trust me? Can you trust me and not be afraid, not think I'll betray you? He added, and looked so intently, so piercingly into Harvey's eyes that it sent shivers down Harvey's spine. He nodded. It was a strange question, although the circumstances were pretty strange too. I'll help, Jacob said. Just you, play along with me when I need you to. Harvey didn't have time to ask what he meant or what his best friend was up to. Suddenly, a shadow grew over their table. It was Alex. What a curious meeting, he said with his trademark smirk, but his eyes weren't smiling. Harvey opened his mouth. He had to think of something to say, but Alex beat him to it. And what, I wonder, are you doing with our guy? Your guy? Harvey asked. I told you there were 3 on the team before you showed up, Alex said. Jacob is the 3rd. We've been working together for 6 months, if memory serves. Harvey had a strange thought. If an elephant had kicked him in the butt, he would have felt much, much better. Jacob. Honest, honorable, like a character in a historical novel, and he became a bandit. How was that even possible? But it seemed to be, and Harvey realized that now he was really screwed. He was alone. There's nowhere to go for help. He's at risk. His wife is basically a hostage, and his sister is still in danger. And is there any way out of this situation? Before Harvey could say anything, Jacob spoke instead, and he didn't hold anything back. He said that he and Harvey were old friends, and that it was a coincidence that he was on vacation in the same part of the world, and that they were working together. A very curious coincidence indeed, said Alex, who seemed to believe and suspect something at the same time. However, he quickly returned to his former dashingly haughty state. Harvey exhaled a sigh of relief when Jacob didn't give away that he asked for help. I guess things were bad, but not exactly nightmarish, since Jacob didn't give it away. Finally, Alex said he had to go. I didn't think you'd do something like this. Harvey couldn't stand it and rebuked his best friend. Jacob, you're the example they used to set for the whole court, how honest and well-mannered you were. Time changes people, he said. That much? No, I'm sorry, but I'll never understand it. And how you lie to me, huh? Like, you work as a waiter or this. I'm a butler now, Jacob explained. It's kind of like a butler on a luxury vacation. Relax. He patted Harvey on the shoulder. I just have to go undercover, he finished, giving him one last strange look, and then he walked forward to Alex, with whom he was talking. Harvey walked along with Elizabeth, but they walked in silence all the way to the right place. The place turned out to be a dilapidated 1-story house that was squeezed into the street on either side by newer 3-story houses. Alex unlocked the door and they entered the hallway full of junk. He unlocked another door and the whole company found themselves in a room where it was cleaner. The light flashed and Harvey rounded his eyes as if he was in a detective thriller. On one of the walls hung several monitors. On the table stood several switched-on laptops. Connected by wires on their screens quickly crawled up some codes. "We monitor how the security service of our client works," Alex explained. "So, we're running out of time. The party is tomorrow. The invitations are ready. Our goal is to get lost in the crowd and get to the safe in the office where the necklace is kept. Jacob will be waiting for us inside. He'll be, as you might have guessed, a waiter. A hell of a cover for almost any situation." Alex grinned. "I'll come as Martin Fox, an oilman from Texas, who just loves to party and throw money around. And you, come on, stand next to me." He led Elizabeth, who still had a frown on her face, over to Harvey by the hand. "Excellent. You're going to play a married couple, rich tourists from the United States. If anyone asks what you're doing at this party and who invited you, you'll say it was Wilhelm Wolf. Don't worry, it's this rich old guy. He really had to come and he promised to bring a bunch of friends. He makes them easily. He had an accident water skiing and had a stroke. Now he's in intensive care, so of course no one can double-check his information. Elizabeth, we need to talk." Harvey turned to his wife. "Back off," growled the young woman. "Oh, easy." Alex waved his hands. "Keep it together, okay? I understand, sister. You are ready to scratch his eyes out after everything. But for one evening, you have to pretend to be a couple of lovebirds, okay? So, go ahead, rehearse, or do whatever you want. But just dare to set me up." Alex's voice was oozing with molten steel. "And I'll make sure that if we fail, if they feed us to the sharks, you're the first to go into their jaws." Harvey nodded. He wasn't going to give up so easily and give up on Elizabeth, but it seemed that explanations really needed to be postponed. "Tomorrow at 6, you will come here as well, except for Jacob. He, as a servant, should be there first thing in the morning while the party is being prepared. After that, we'll all leave together, but in separate cars. In the meantime..." Alex took a rolled-up paper roll from the shelf and rolled it out on the table, pressing empty bottles on the edges. "A plan of the mansion and the surrounding area. Study it, ask questions, memorize it. This goes to you first." He jabbed his finger at Harvey. "I hope you don't suffer from topographical cretinism." "No, I'll remember everything," he replied, and thought with a bitter chuckle that his old geography teacher would have been blown away by the fact that he could use her science, the way she had fiercely taught him how to navigate the terrain when the whole class went on a field trip to the suburbs. This time, when Harvey returned to the hotel, his sister greeted him not with reproach, but by suddenly being very anxious. "Are you all right?" came upon him, and her eyes glistened in tears. "What's the matter?" asked Harvey. "What's going on? Oh, how awful it all is." Natalie splashed her hands and Harvey wondered what if his sister knew about his misfortunes? Then she would be in great danger. "You know, today a tourist had her cell phone taken out of her purse while she was waiting in line for a coconut. And another one had her purse stolen on the beach. That's terrible. What a nightmare. And a decent place. No, it's impossible. It's all criminal. We have to be very careful." Harvey almost burst into hysterical laughter. He should have his sister's problems. What would her reaction be if she found out what kind of crime really lived here, and that he, Harvey, was going on a robbery for many millions of dollars? "Don't worry," he sighed, of course, without giving away his current worries. "I'll be home soon enough. Nothing bad is going to happen here. Believe me. Come on, let's go to dinner." He really hoped nothing bad would happen, and if they stole his or her purse or his cell phone, well, he would rather meet 1,000 such petty pickpockets than a moment in the company of Elizabeth's gloomy brother. And Harvey also decided that it would be at this party, when he and Elizabeth were alone together, that he would have a serious talk with her about everything, because he had no intention of letting her go like that. The next morning, Harvey didn't want to get out from under the covers for a long time. It was a little bit like when he was a kid, too, when he'd huddled under the blanket because his mom said they were going to the dentist and it wouldn't hurt at all. Only Harvey was a big enough boy by then to realize he was being lied to. And now he realized that even if Alex was choking on his speeches that the case would go as planned, he realized that everything could go wrong. And then, Well, the sharks Alex had named might still be the least of the threats, and what was especially disgusting about the whole situation was that Harvey realized the danger threatening Elizabeth. And even more nightmarish was that he didn't understand how to get her back, how to convince her that he had made a mistake, but that didn't mean he didn't feel anything for her. "What are you sitting there for? Are you sick?" Natalie, who had come into the room, was now pulling the blanket off him. "Coral Reef excursion. I'm not gonna miss it because of you." It was weird to gaze at the colorful fish under the transparent bottom of the boat, then to fry on the beach because you forgot your sunscreen, then to try some donuts with weird fruit jelly at your sister's insistence. In general, to spend the day tourist style knowing that the clock is ticking and you're about to go to work. Harvey looked longingly at a couple of local cops spotted on the street. They would have known, but he held on. "Are you going on a date?" my sister whispered angrily. "No, what makes you think that?" "I'm just going for a walk." "Yeah, you can't lie, Harvey." Natalie rolled her eyes. "Are you going to that hot girl? You know, the one you met here?" Harvey said. Yes. He decided that this spontaneous lie could be very profitable. "Maybe I'll be back late." "And I'm going to the restaurant alone," Natalie said defiantly. "You can do whatever you want." Harvey waved her off, but then winked at her. "I'll tell my mother what you've been doing. I'll have dinner, watch a show, some local dancing, and go to bed." He hardly remembered how he got to the right place. Alex opened the door and immediately threw the suitcase into Harvey's hands. "Get dressed." Harvey strode into another room, like a closet, and pulled on the suit. It was a little tight, and the bounty around his neck seemed like a ridiculous element. He'd hated ties before, but he had to, of course. "Done," said Harvey, walking out, and the next moment he was speechless. The scarlet dress suited Elizabeth perfectly. Or was it just that she was, like a magician, made 100 times more beautiful? The intricately draped silk encased her body, emphasizing her feminine curves. And it would seem that the skirt was just above the knee. The neckline barely opened her collarbones, and her arms were covered up to the bone of the elbow. But how seductive she was. Her green eyes were watching a wary, untamed cat from beneath her neatly arranged bangs. She had never worn such high heels before, and now, as Harvey approached her, she was a little taller than he was. Brilliant. The marvelous moments were ruined by Alex, who clapped his hands several times with his trademark grin, as if he was watching a theatrical performance. A beautiful couple. What an idiot you are, if you preferred the other one, no offense. In general, it was not worth dreaming that Elizabeth would forget the affair, but the fact that her brother reminded her of it right now made Harvey want to strangle him. They went outside and got into 2 cars. Harvey took a seat next to the driver's seat. Elizabeth smoothly turned from the narrow street to the normal road. "Elizabeth, be quiet," she said, looking sternly ahead of her. "I will not be silent," Harvey answered, and then he spoke about what a scoundrel he had been, about how wrong he had been, and that she had turned his life upside down, and so he, feeling infinite affection, was afraid of what he had never felt for anyone before. He spoke frankly and truthfully. He admitted that to forgive such a thing, well, probably impossible, but it is possible. To give a second, and he swears the only chance. The car passed the driveway, snaking between immaculately green English lawns, and stopped in front of the mansion. Elizabeth got out, tossed the keys to the valet boy. "I need to think." She was silent the whole way, and those were her first words to Harvey. Only 3 words, but how much they meant to him. They were the main thing that gave him hope. He gave her his hand, and they went up the broad staircase, at each end of which sat a mighty lion of black marble. Harvey handed the butler, or what else could the man be called, a couple of invitations. They were let through. He took a deep breath and exhaled game on. Every step of the way Harvey imagined that they would be exposed. He imagined colorfully how the master of the mansion would appear before them, make small talk, and then suddenly, at the snap of his fingers, the broad-shouldered security guards would appear and seize them. Elizabeth screams. She is dragged away, and he can't help her. He is powerless and realizes for the umpteenth time that if it weren't for his vile treason, she wouldn't be here at all. However, the slowly dragging moments added up to minutes and nothing happened. The master of the house did appear before them, but only to greet them, to wish them to enjoy the holiday. And then James Richter hurriedly stepped aside, must be, as Harvey realized, to greet the more important guests. Great. Jacob lingered nearby with a tray of black game appetizers. The house is clear from the veranda. I eliminated the guard. What did you do? Harvey's eyes widened. He's just sleeping. Jacob quirked an eyebrow. I'm not an idiot. Harvey realized that right now, their lives depended on their every action. In fact, their lives depended on it. But he didn't miss the opportunity and put his hand on his wife's waist. I think one could hear Elizabeth's teeth gritting, but she only smiled sweetly at him. When they entered the veranda, they actually had to step over the guard snoring on the floor. Then the map of the mansion, as in his brain imprinted, Harvey turned to the stairs, dragging his wife behind him. Up to the second floor, turn left, and there's the study. Shoo, Elizabeth said, and knelt in front of the door. Something thin and metallic flashed in her graceful fingers, and Harvey guessed it was a lockpick. So this is what she learned in her youth, Harvey thought, and swallowed hard. How much he didn't know about his wife. They entered the study, just a little lighted by a miniature flashlight. The safe was to be behind one of the paintings, and the beam had already picked out a portrait of some king, just what they needed. But then the flashlight beam disappeared because the light of the overhead lamps flooded the room. Harvey and Elizabeth turned around sharply. How unbecoming to repay hospitality like this. James Richter was standing across the hall, pointing a gun at them. I suppose you have come for the diamonds. Harvey stepped forward, blocking his wife. We were forced. How interesting. James grinned. I've never heard such an explanation before. Usually, thieves like to tell stories about terminally ill relatives. There was some movement behind Richter. The door to the balcony must have been ajar on the occasion of the heat, unprecedented even for the tropics, and now dark silhouettes were visible there. Harvey noticed it. Elizabeth, too, she pushed him lightly in the back. But Harvey, as if instinctively, realized not to let it show. This is definitely not mansion security. Look, you stole the necklace. Stole it. Well, of course you were told that, grinned Richter. I returned it. You see, John Smith was supposed to marry my only daughter. Then he changed his mind, and he left my house, repaying my hospitality by doing what you are about to do. He stole what Queen Victoria herself had given my great-great-grandmother. I had to return it, that's all. But why did you go to the police? Harvey asked. In general, he did not care about the squabbles of these rich people. He was just stalling for time. The official way was too long. It was amazing how Richter's hand had not yet trembled in the tense and extended position he confidently held the gun. He would have had time to re-hide it. No. Can you imagine the insolence? To try and steal him away a second time. But fortunately, now I don't make the same mistakes. Why keep it in the same safe? No, the necklace is on the other side of the world, and in the safe. The man shrugged his shoulders. So some stocks and some change. Harvey was about to ask something else stupid, but then the door opened and Alex burst into the office. And he was armed too. Now the focus of Richter's attention shifted from the unlucky burglars to the protagonist of this daring attack. I always knew it, Alex threw down hard. If you want to do something good, you do it yourself. Open the damn safe. Get down, exclaimed Harvey and pushed his wife down into the side. Now she took cover behind the huge desk. With a shriek, Elizabeth covered her head with her hands and shrank into a ball, Harvey covering her as best he could. And with good reason. More people burst into the room from the balcony, sounds of desperate struggle. Then everything went quiet. Hey, are you all right? Harvey was astonished to see Jacob leaning over them. Alex was lying defeated on the floor with his hands behind his back. Richter had his palm pressed to his face, and it looked like his nose had been damaged in the fight. There were also people in local police uniforms and some strangers in ordinary clothes, but with faces hidden by frightening and carnival-like masks. What's going on? Elizabeth asked pitifully. It's over, Jacob replied. You are no longer your brother's prisoner. Elizabeth stared around with almost frantic eyes, and then, suddenly she burst into tears. Harvey happened to be there, and his wife was in his arms. He just wrapped his arms around her, protecting her, comforting, but gently, afraid that in the next moment she would rush away, push him away. but Elizabeth just cried. It was a very long night. The party was over and the guests were leaving in a hurry. Harvey, Elizabeth, and Jacob, as well as Richter, soon found themselves in an office, as Harvey realized, belonging to the local police. They were given the opportunity to all talk in private. Jacob explained everything. It turned out that he had indeed joined Alex as a member of his gang, but had only done so to stop him. Jacob said that for a couple of years now he has been working for a secret international organization that goes after criminals of all stripes. He explained that they don't belong to any country and are basically something like knights errant. Our services are used by small countries, usually island countries like this one. Your grandmother was right when she forbade you to read books about noble pirates and such things, Harvey said thoughtfully. I've grown up all right, Jacob said. Why did you tell me? Don't you have to keep secrets there, said Harvey. Theoretically, yes, Jacob nodded. But the thing is, I'm getting ready to leave. I'd had enough adventure for a couple years. And the paycheck, it'll allow me to settle down on a beach somewhere, maybe open a fish restaurant for tourists. As for my co-workers, he winked. You haven't seen their faces. Harvey nodded. It all sounded logical. Why isn't that guy handcuffed? He nodded at James Richter, who, by the way, did have a huge bruise on his face. Because he hired us, of course, having contacted the local authorities. We helped, let's say, to find out who Smith would send and to arrest him. Now Smith himself, of course, has some interesting stuff on him. He was aiming at me and my wife. Harvey was indignant. You're overreacting, James muttered. Harvey clenched his fists under the table. He knew it was stupid to fight, but he wanted to. Can't you do anything for Elizabeth? He turned to his friend. She's not. She's in no danger, Jacob nodded. She's been cooperating with us from the beginning. She reported what Alex did and said. She's free. And so are you? As for Alex, he'll get what he deserves. Harvey sighed. Well, since this whole unbelievable situation had been resolved favorably, he wanted to get away from it as soon as possible, especially since Elizabeth had already gotten up and said she wanted to leave. He caught up with her at the exit of the police station. We need to talk. Wait, he blocked her way and looked into her eyes. Please. His wife looked at him carefully, then nodded and walked towards the embankment. And there she took off her shoes, walked forward, and sat down on the sand. She stretched out her legs. Now a wave was lapping at them, almost to the knee. Harvey came over and, without thinking about soaking his suit, plopped down beside her. I love you, he said quietly. But it happened, she replied just as quietly. But you, and you? Understand, I would forgive a lot of things. But this, I realized that you could understand everything, and maybe, if I come back, nothing like this will never happen again. Except, you cheated on me that night. You broke me and made me new. They were silent for a while. A seashell with a sea creature on it washed up on the sand, and Harvey tossed it back into the sea. So it's over. Elizabeth turned toward him. One moment and her arms wrapped around his neck and her lips covered his. It was a long, light, yet soul-piercing kiss. And then when she pulled away, he read the answer in her eyes. Harvey stood up. He felt strange. He could not believe it all. And with it came a clear realization. It's true. I believe you'll be happy. You'll find a woman you'll love and she'll love you. You'll have children. And you? Me? Elizabeth said thoughtfully. I'll probably go somewhere. Jacob promised to borrow money. He's a good guy. I think I need to decide what I want in life. And then I'll be happy too. And you? Harvey struggled to say the words, but he couldn't keep quiet. You won't write me, will you? Never. And you won't call me. She was no longer looking at him. Her attention was fixed on the horizon, where the sun was rising rapidly. You realize that yourself? Harvey nodded. The unspoken words seemed to burn his throat, but then it got easier. Goodbye, he said. Goodbye, she replied. And then he turned and walked slowly away. He had to get back to the hotel. He went back to his room, took a shower, and went to take a nap. He woke up to a knock on the door. It was his sister. You've been out all night again. She was indignant. You'll sleep through breakfast. By the way, we have a return flight in the evening. I'm resting. She threw an indignant glance at him when they went down to the cafe. I'll have a lot to remember. And you? Going to your mistress. Natalie, Harvey told her, would you be so kind as to be quiet, at least for today, please? Her sister snorted and shrugged her shoulders. They sat down to breakfast. Then they went to the local zoo and also bought souvenirs for their relatives. Then they were going to the airport. Harvey remembered various Hollywood melodramas, where at the end, one of the heroes is at the airport, and the other half with whom they thought they had parted forever suddenly appears there, and there is a happy reunion between them. Together with his sister, they have already passed customs and the stewardess was already calling for boarding. And suddenly Harvey turned around. Elizabeth was standing there in the hall, and next to her was Jacob, his ex-wife and his best friend, whom something told him they weren't likely to see again, raised their hands and waved goodbye. Harvey didn't have the heart to do the same in return, so he just sent them a smile and a nod. What are you digging around for? Come on, his sister tugged at his sleeve. And off he went, but he turned around again and saw Jacob and Elizabeth walking away. She had said Jacob had promised to help her, and now, as he watched them walk away holding hands, Harvey had no doubt that he would take care of his most precious woman. And he also thought that he would try very, very hard to be happy, as Elizabeth had said. He would always remember her and love her a little, but he let her go and wished her happiness. Soon the plane took off, and sitting in the seat, Harvey looked at the clouds and thought that he was very happy to finally return home.